A voice roared, "Russell Raymond." Before the crowded city gate, soldiers guarding the gate were stopping a man. The guard held up the man's name tag to look at it. Then with some hesitation he looked at the man's face again. Raymond? The guard's mind was in a bit of turmoil. Wasn't that the founding clan? The man with a dirt-stained face and blazing red eyes was the protagonist, the noble Russell Raymond. The guard looked him up and down at his tattered, dirty clothes. His arms still wrapped in bandages, but his large build carried the aura of a noble family. No matter what he wore, his inherent elegance shone through. Why was he dressed like this? Unable to hold him for long, the two guards finished their check and returned his card. "Check complete. You may enter." One guard glanced at him and then turned to ask the other, "Huh, you know him? He's from the founding Raymond clan." The other guard seemed very shocked upon hearing this. "Huh. Then why does he look like that?" The two of them gossiped behind his back. "A noble? Dressed like that? It seems the founding clan isn't all that great, huh? I heard the White Tower is recruiting mercenaries. Is that why he's here? No way, he's not that poor. Why would a noble become a mercenary?" A cold expression appeared on his face as he heard their words. Russell sneered and ducked into a corner. So nosy, these scoundrels. The place he entered was the capital Camelot, an incredibly magnificent place with remarkably simple and peaceful architecture. He walked step by step following the flow of people. In front of him appeared a skyscraper-like tower, the Magic Tower, where all the royal guards gathered. He thought about his not-so-great past. There was a time when he too had worked hard to get here. He thought about how his family had faced a crisis and how he had to prevent his family from collapsing. On the battlefield, everywhere were flames and his father's enemies. He thought of the person who had stabbed his father in the back after his father died in the war against the Empire. He and everyone in the castle had to evacuate immediately. He and the others had to flee the castle, and he had to enter the Magic Tower to reclaim his family's territory. At that time, he was still just an innocent boy evacuating with everyone tears in his eyes, but those eyes still followed the noble figure of his mother. Mother. Around the boy's neck was a sparkling necklace, but his mouth still cried out with great reluctance, "No, my mother is still—" It was an absurd dream. Inside the tower there were 3 chairs for the 3 most powerful individuals. He stood before them. "I was expelled from the academy even before I applied to join the Magic Tower." An announcement rang out, making his whole body tremble. "Russell Raymond." The examiner spoke in a cold voice. "You have failed 3 subjects. This is unprecedented in the academy." He insulted him terribly. "You may be good at theory, but you can't even reach the 2nd magic circle." Another person nearby joined the conversation. "You won't be able to withstand the mana flow restriction. Why don't you choose a path other than a mage?" Those kinds of words were like a knife stabbing straight into his heart. "Restricted mana flow. Because I was born with a narrow and weak mana flow. I can't absorb too much mana, nor can I release mana. That's the cruelest punishment a mage can receive." He sat in a corner, his mind full of thoughts about that dark past. Anyway, due to a fortuitous encounter while being a mercenary, he had actually managed to reach the 2nd magic circle. Russell looked at his hands. "But I'm still just a third-rate mage." At this moment, hurried footsteps ran out from inside the tower. The tower's announcer quickly spoke, "Today's temporary job registration process has ended. Please come back tomorrow." The people waiting outside the tower's door were furious. "We've waited all day. What can we do?" He silently listened to their complaints, unable to demand anything. They quickly left for another place. "I heard the museum is recruiting temporary mages. Want to try?" "What are you talking about?" He slept in a corner hearing those words. "They're just looking for some first circle mages for cleaning." Outside the tower, the bright sunlight was accompanied by words full of helplessness. "Coming here only brings shame?" In that corner of the wall, his lonely figure sat watching everything. His eyes showed a look of helplessness as he chuckled to himself. Then Russell reached into his pocket, seemingly wanting to take something out. It turned out to be a money pouch, but inside there was only one brightly shining gold coin. He decided to go to a place. "All right, I'll go." That place was the Luvium Grand Museum. The museum guide led everyone. "This is the museum, the largest in the kingdom. This is the main hall of the Luvium Museum." The guide walked and talked. "This week, we have nobles visiting." It turned out he and the others were there to clean, so this place had to be spotless. He stood aside, silently listening to his tasks. The guide was very careful in assigning tasks to him and the others. "Please, be careful with the wind force when using wind to clean. If anyone damages anything, at this moment his face and eyes changed unusually. His voice deepened, be prepared to face the consequences. He looked at the objects around him and thought to himself, these are all fakes. Why are they guarding them so fiercely? Russell walked silently step by step following the guide. But then, something suddenly caught his attention. He walked to a room and looked up. This place, it looks so familiar. The place where he was standing was the mystical creatures room. Russell whispered the name of the room, mystical creatures. He stood before the door, hesitating, not daring to enter. But at this moment, something strange happened in his pocket. The object his mother had given him when he was a child suddenly vibrated violently. He quickly took it out. Why is it suddenly vibrating? He looked at what he was holding. It was a ring his mother had given him as a child. He watched it vibrate in his hand. Mother's ring. Then he felt something strange about the room and looked up. Then he hesitated pensively, not daring to step inside. But his body moved on its own uncontrollably. My legs are moving automatically. He stepped into the mystical creatures room as if being dragged by fate. The guide looked around blankly for Russell. Why is one person missing? Russell Raymond? He searched for him in confusion. Russell, at this moment, had entered the mystical creatures room and was standing before a giant skeleton. The ring in his hand vibrated more and more intensely. It's vibrating stronger now. He sensed a strange frequency. Mother, do you want to tell me something? Please tell me. His eyelids closed involuntarily. In the space within the ring, he and his mother had entered this room when he was a child. Back then, he was just a cheerful, mischievous little boy. At this moment, the boy noticed something in the room. Then, the boy pulled his mother's hand and pointed in one direction. It was a small path, but it looked very secret. At this moment, he suddenly woke up, his eyes wide open. Then he followed his childhood memory into a glass cabinet. Before him was an ancient dragon's heart. This is the ancient dragon's heart, and the ring seemed to have some connection. He slowly brought the ring up to look. Dragon heart. And a ring that looks like a dragon's eye. Russell slowly put the ring on his finger, feeling a bit confused. Why was mother crying? He didn't understand what was happening. Why did mother bring me here? His arm dropped straight down. It had stopped vibrating. An ancient dragon's heart. A giant skeleton. What connection did they have? He stood silently in one place, not speaking. Then he laughed helplessly. It must be my imagination. His eyes lowered to look at the ring. Right? At this moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. The ring suddenly emitted dazzling bolts of lightning. A voice spoke. Heart and eyes intersect. Opening another eye. You are qualified to become a new legend. I will give you one more chance. That was when I realized the wheel of fate had broken, and the life I had always longed for had begun. Faint calls. Raymond. He was bewildered, not knowing what was happening. What's that sound? It sounds so angry. But I recognize it. Whose voice is this? His eyelids fluttered open, and a familiar scene appeared before his eyes. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to his student days and was right in the middle of class. The professor slammed a book on his head. Then Russell tremblingly stood up. Yes, sir. He was furious. I know your grades are high, but how dare you sleep in my class? You've got guts. He was dazed, not understanding what was happening, his face still a bit sleepy. Looking at the man before him, he was utterly bewildered. Professor Hubert? He glanced at a classmate, but he passed away. That classmate turned to look at him. What's wrong with him? He glanced around the classroom. His classmates turned and sneered at him. What's going on? Everything became hazy when he woke up. Russell raised his hands and patted his face, not understanding what was happening. His lips trembled and twitched. Looking at the scene around him, he gradually accepted the truth. Have I returned to the past? He was dazzlingly bright, shining through the classroom windows. In the classroom, he stood facing his professor, his teacher, but he was still in a daze. Have I returned to the past? Professor Hubert stared at him blankly in silence. Then he put 2 fingers to his forehead. You're not acting like yourself at all. However, you still must be punished. Get out. He had just woken up, not yet understanding what was happening, when he was suddenly kicked out of the classroom. Russell walked on a familiar path. Time travel. At this moment, he stood before a hazy image of himself. This kind of magic. Can it even be considered magic? When the other eye opens, you will become the foundation to create a new myth. So show that you are worthy. For the future of the new myth, I will grant you another chance. He understood and affirmed they definitely did. Suddenly, he discovered the familiar ring on his hand had disappeared. Saying this is another chance. He was standing there staring blankly at the ring when Professor Hubert opened the door and stepped out. Did my mother help me? He turned to look. Russell. Without many words, he bowed his head to admit his fault. Sleeping in the middle of class like that isn't like me at all. I'm sorry. He reprimanded him. It seems we need to talk privately. Come to my office during lunchtime. I understand. He left, leaving Russell still bowing behind him. Then I'll wait for you. Looking at that familiar figure, he felt how precious it was. How long has it been since I got into school trouble? But this feeling is still nice. That figure sauntered down the long lecture hall. At this moment, an angry voice rang out. Hey! It turned out to be the bully from that year who had come and shoved him hard by the neck. Russell angrily turned to look. What kind of damn joke is this? He arrogantly insulted him. What damn thing? The underling beside him, without many words, wanted to strike. You seem too relaxed, huh, bastard? Before that guy could attack, he was stopped. He was afraid everyone there would see. The professors are watching. The blonde-haired guy turned back to insult him. I definitely told you to copy the notes for me, yet you just dozed off like that. He stared blankly at that familiar figure. Komar Frederick. He used threatening words and an angry gaze to look at him. If you don't want to die, follow me to the restroom right now. The three of them left while he still stood there watching. Russell smiled faintly. That's right. Things like that did happen. Suddenly he discovered a system screen with his face on it. It appeared, making him dazed. What's this mission escape bullying? Teach the 3 class bullies a lesson. Reward low-grade magic stone. Russell curiously touched the system screen. Is this an illusion? He didn't believe it had appeared right before his eyes. It's not. Komar saw him hesitating and not moving, so he urged, Hey, what are you doing? Not following. Threatening words that made people feel contempt came from his mouth. You know, running away is useless, right? We're in the academy now. After saying that, he gave a sinister smile. But if you're scared, try running. He looked at him unwillingly. All right. Then plans continuously formed in Russell's mind. Forget about that mission. First, I'll teach them a lesson. After countless years living the life of a mercenary, nothing could compare to the killing intent he had felt from the monsters before. The 3 of them quickly gathered in the restroom. These guys are just kid level. He held his cigar and provoked. So you finally decided to come in here, you larva. Hearing him call him a larva, he calmly replied, Yes, of course, you damn aphid. The underling next to him, seeing him talk back, cursed. This guy's really lost his mind. He slowly walked up to the underling. He quickly raised his fist. Looks like you want a beating, huh? He didn't say much and directly rushed forward. But his strength was different now. Those punches were now just mosquito bites. He was punched in the stomach with incredibly strong force. Then that guy fell backward, his mouth spraying saliva. Another underling beside him saw this and also became angry. He directly rushed forward. You piece of trash! He had just cursed once when he was punched straight in the face. Komar stood pensively watching his 2 underlings get defeated one by one. He sneered, honestly. Then he directly threw the cigar away. Since we can't use magic, did you learn some cheap martial arts moves? He stood silently listening to those words. Indeed, nothing more can be expected from a fallen clan. He put 4 rings on his hand. We can't use magic in the academy. He wanted to attack him with his strongest moves. But it seems you don't know that we can use small artifacts. Without many words, Komar rushed forward, clenching his fist. Die, you brat! He didn't give him a chance to attack and dodge to the side. That powerful blow was easily blocked by him. He was stunned to see him suddenly become so strong. Russell directly broke his wrist, bending it backward. Komar Frederick! He screamed in pain as his wrist was broken. Then Komar collapsed to the ground. His sarcastic words, You've been overtaken by your brothers in the rankings. Even your own clan has given up on an idiot like you. If you meet a strong opponent, you slowly avoid them, but if you meet a weak opponent, you immediately bully them. His words became increasingly harsh. A trashy bastard like you. How dare you even mention my clan? He went from being a bully to a pathetic figure. He was like a demon in front of him. Wait, hey, wait. He punched him straight in the face, not giving him any chance to explain. Listen to me. A scream echoed in the restroom. He left with a sharp gaze. From now on, behave yourself properly. The 3 of them lay collapsed on the ground. If you don't want to die, he walked out of the restroom. Then he suddenly slumped against the wall. Russell felt regret for his actions. Did I go too far? His eyes were lifeless at this moment. My eyes are so tired. The system appeared again, making him curious. Low-grade magic stone can be consumed. The system released a magic stone for him. He looked at it in his hand. It was very small but very sharp. Can be consumed. Russell hesitated a bit. Does it want me to eat this? He sat looking at the crystal. This is edible, don't tell me I have to eat it. He was having an internal conflict. People in the forest don't even eat stones anymore. He looked at the crystal with some hesitation. But in the end he decided to put it in his mouth and eat it directly. At this moment the system announced, "Notification, you have absorbed the lowest grade mana stone." He chewed while tasting it. Perhaps this is also an opportunity for me, just like returning to the past. After swallowing the crystal, his body emitted a powerful energy. That energy exploded instantly. Notification, you have received mana from the mana stone. An incredibly powerful energy was causing him excruciating pain. Swallowing the crystal made his body emit incredibly strong energies. He was slowly sensing that energy. Mana is overflowing. Notification, mana in the magic circle is increasing. His heart muscles pulsed, and it was absorbed by the magic circle. After a while he finally finished absorbing it, and it was stabilizing again. Luckily it's stabilizing. He looked at his hands with joy. With this method, absorbing the crystal felt incredibly exciting to him. I can definitely overcome the narrowed mana flow, the fall of the clan, being expelled from the academy, and becoming a third-rate mercenary mage. I can change my own destiny. He walked with a cheerful mood and a strong body. At this moment, Russell went to Professor Hubert's office. Coming in, excuse me. Professor Hubert was already sitting there waiting for him. Sit. He sat down and the professor spoke softly. Russell, looking at the teacups and delicious cakes on the table. Today you're not like your usual self. Professor Hubert found him very strange in today's class. Could it be? He thought of starting the conversation, which made Russell look dazed. Are you facing some difficulties? He held his teacup and drank. I heard your classmates are bullying you. Professor Hubert, in my previous life he always helped me until the very end. The professor's kindness made him secretly happy. I've always wanted to say this. When he returned from the past, he was confident in his strength. You don't need to worry, sir. Professor Hubert, after hearing this, couldn't believe his ears. Thank you very much, Professor. He coughed. As a professor, I must take care of my students. He was addressing a naive child in front of him. At this moment, he handed him a book. Anyway, you dozed off in class, so you must be punished. Professor Hubert opened a page of the book. It won't be easy. Write an analytical report from page 62 to 74 of in-depth elemental studies. Then he closed the book. This is a section even the senior students struggled with. The system appeared at this moment. Notification. Mission complete the assignment given by Professor Hubert. Reward based on completion level and Professor Hubert's satisfaction. Reward edible lowest grade mana stone. He looked at the system's reward. Homework is also a mission. Professor Hubert saw him pondering for a moment and asked, What's wrong? Too difficult? He quickly replied, No, sir. Russell eagerly accepted this assignment from the professor. Thank you, sir. Inside his room, bright sunlight streamed through the window. He sat tiredly on his chair. The analytical assignment Professor Hubert had given him was now almost complete. This assignment isn't difficult. In my previous life, due to limited mana capacity, I focused on theory to compensate. Even as a mercenary, I never stopped studying. He remembered standing pensively looking out the window before. But in this life, there's something else just as important as studying. That important thing is practicing mana flow. Mana flow is the path of mana movement. Mana is absorbed through respiration. It passes through the mana flow and gathers in the heart. Earlier, he was trying to fight a giant beast. It attacked him relentlessly. Russell did his best to counter its blows. From there, one can project a mask to create magic, the first fire magic circle. In other words, the stronger the mana flow, the more mana can be gathered and released faster. That monster continuously rushed towards him. At this moment, seeing he couldn't hold on, he quickly used shield. Suddenly, he glanced at a spot. The monster attacked from somewhere with a powerful force straight at the stone. But that stone shattered. My mana flow is extremely narrow and weak. He was slammed against the wall. At this moment, a light from the mana flow emanated from behind his body. He had sensed it. Huh? Suddenly, Russell was sucked into a deep pool. Has heaven sympathized with my unfortunate fate? Or is this just luck? He lay collapsed on the cold ground. After regaining consciousness, Russell quickly pushed himself up. His gaze went forward, looking into the vast expanse. A historical relic of unknown origin. Hidden inside were 2 spell books. He quickly reached out his hand to take them. Abundant Flow went and Mage's body. Outside, hurried footsteps were running towards him. Abundant Flow helps train the body and amplify mana flow. Mage's body replaces muscle groups with a part of the mana flow. In other words, the healthier the body, the more stable the mana flow. When I have an adult body, it won't change much. But now that my body is developing, the results should be more noticeable. This time I will overcome the narrowed mana flow. Under the sunset glow of the school campus, he was training with all his might. I have no strength left. After training quite a bit, he panted, "So tired. That's probably enough for today." Notification training mission. Abundant Flow Magic Route run 5 kilometers, completed 0.055 kilometers. He looked at the system screen disappointedly. It was silent just now, and now it suddenly appears like this. Special announcement. When practicing Abundant Flow, you can do this mission once a day. Notification based on the level of Abundant Flow. The required running distance will change. Notification after reaching a certain level of Abundant Flow, the mission will no longer appear. He flinched and pulled his hand back. Why so urgent? That made his face break out in sweat. All right, I'll run. I struggled so much to get this chance. I can't sit still. He ran for a while more and more. The running distance increased. His legs trembled from running a long distance. His body was now completely numb and trembling. He just wanted to collapse quickly. But looking at the system screen, that number still wasn't enough. Almost there. He rested his hands on his knees and panted internally. Just a little more. At this moment, he gathered all his momentum to run as fast as he could. Notification. You have completed the mission. Reward delivered. He collapsed to the ground. I can't go on. At this moment, a figure was secretly watching him. How do I get back to the dorm? That figure looked at him with envious eyes. Useless effort, Russell Raymond. Professor Hubert looked at the stack of papers on his desk and praised silently. I didn't expect him to come to such profound conclusions with just those academic materials. But Hubert still asked Russell again for more assurance. Are you sure you prepared this progress report yourself? Russell confidently nodded. Yes, I can swear a mana oath to guarantee it. Hubert's eyebrows furrowed. A mana oath. That attitude is too confident. Russell's face was incredibly excited even when making such an oath when speaking such a frank vow. He didn't inquire further but picked up the report, smiled, and said, I am very satisfied with your work. The system appeared and immediately informed him, you have completed the mission. You will receive a reward, including a low-grade mana stone, a support gem of the same size, and some knowledge with accompanying effects. Does this mean the deeper and broader my knowledge, the stronger I become? Russell's red eyes turned towards his teacher with a thought. If that's the case, Hubert said to him, well done, you can go home now. But Russell stayed and suddenly exclaimed, Professor? Professor Hubert curiously listened to what he was about to say. He slowly spoke each word, Russell's mouth twitching. I have a favor to ask of you, sir. After hearing his request, Hubert was a bit curious. You want to use the department library? May I ask why? Hubert explained to him. The student library already has enough books to meet your needs. Russell immediately replied very calmly, I've read all the books there, sir. The professor's finger suddenly trembled in disbelief. All of them, he replied, yes. He leaned back and exclaimed, wait, Jem, unbelievable. But even if what you say is true, using the department library is another story. He clasped his hands together and looked serious. I'll have to see if you're qualified. Russell knew he had a chance, so he was overjoyed and accepted immediately. Yes, sir, I completely agree. And thanks to that, his system window was now full of Professor Hubert's assignments. Russell, under the green trees, secretly sighed. I didn't expect him to give me so much homework. Ha ha. Well, he is strict. Sweat dripped from his face. Russell wiped it away with his hand. But the deeper one understands theory, the stronger their magic. He resolved to himself, I must obtain the advanced knowledge in the department library at all costs. Russell opened the cork of a glass vial. Though it's a bit troublesome. He drank the water he brought. But since the reward for completing the mission is a mana stone, I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside him and called his name annoyingly, Russell Raymond. Anton appeared with his hateful-faced cronies. I heard you carry a cursed mana flow, but you look like a training fanatic, huh? My friend suffered because of you. Russell, without any fear, turned to ask them, so are you guys here for revenge or something? Anton burst out laughing as if it were a joke. Me revenge. His face darkened and he uttered insults. Stop dreaming. Who would bother taking revenge on a useless bastard like you? Russell coldly glanced at them with his blazing red eyes. Just trampling you is enough? Anton walked past him and deliberately bumped Russell's shoulder. He gave a wicked smile and warned Russell, "See you in class." His underling followed and asked, "Huh? You're not going to teach him a lesson right now?" "Idiot, there's no audience for us here." A gust of wind blew, making Russell's hair and scarf flutter. He thought to himself, "Class." He knew exactly what Anton was referring to, the practical magic class where students were graded based on the results of sparring matches, and Russell remembered very clearly his pathetic state in the practical class. It was also where he was despised and bullied. Anton stood before him surrounded by bright flashes of fire. He gave a very smug demonic smile. "I can't believe I was foolish enough to forget those memories." But the situation was different now. Russell was no longer worried about it. "I'm ready." The system appeared and informed him that the main mission was to achieve the second magic circle and expand his understanding of the skills he possessed. Russell then studied theory very diligently, focusing on his essay. There was also physical training. Sweat poured down him, but he didn't stop. Russell submitted a large stack of assignments to Professor Hubert. The system's reward notifications were countless. That night, Russell stood before his desk and stared intently. Small stones were placed by him on the table. "I have the mana stones." His hand reached out to grab them but then stopped. "But," Russell thought worriedly, "will my mana flow be strong enough to control these mana stones?" Russell's eyes widened in thought, cold sweat dripping down his cheek. Russell's eyes widened in thought, cold sweat dripping down his cheek. Russell put the mana stones in his mouth and bit into them, chewing greedily as usual. In the first few minutes his body showed no reaction, but then a surge of magic rose like a flame. White light exploded and surrounded Russell, making him stagger. Russell's eyes were completely white. He felt intense heat flowing around him. His body felt like it was on fire. His legs buckled a little. The fire-type mana flows continued to surge. "I must quickly create a flow." He cupped his face and concentrated with all his might. "I have to determine the flow of mana." Russell's arm touched his chest, concentrating a core of power in the center of his body. He gritted his teeth, using all his strength to follow the sequence, rotate it, and create a new magic circle. Russell's heart pounded in the flames. The mana circle was formed. "If I fail, my heart won't be able to take it." That magic circle was incredibly intricate and grew larger and larger. Russell took a breath and tried to tell himself, "But I've already made up my mind." He breathed in and out steadily to concentrate the mana flow into the core. His hand held on to that core so the magic wouldn't be disturbed. "At all costs, I must get it." Boom! A pillar of mana shot straight out of Russell's room window in the dead of the quiet night. Russell had a completely new sensation that made him realize, "I did it." The mana accumulated in his chest flowed more steadily. But at this moment he was also exhausted and gradually fainted, a thought still lingering in his mind. Second magic circle. Russell fell to the floor and fainted while mana still circulated around his heart. The system popped up a notification he had completed the mission and would receive a reward. "Your knowledge of the fire attribute has significantly increased." The magic power of fire magic was enhanced accordingly. His knowledge of other attributes also appeared in the same way. After a tiring night of leveling up morning, sunlight shone into Hubert's room. "Excellent. I didn't expect you to complete all the assignments I gave." Hubert sat at his desk and spoke seriously to him. "All right, this is the last question." Before speaking, he carefully considered. "This question is even more fundamental than the previous ones, a very practical question." Hubert then spoke, "Among the four structures that create magic, which one is the most important?" Russell's face showed surprise. He couldn't answer immediately. Professor Hubert looked at him impatiently. "Ah, that's right. I'm asking my student a question I only just found the answer to recently." He then slammed his hand on the table, intending to change the question. "Never mind. I'll ask another question." But Russell now spoke up in response. "The answer is..." Hubert paused after hearing the answer from Russell. He exclaimed in surprise in his mind, "That student knows the answer." Russell faced his professor and slowly said, "The answer is..." The answer was very concise but hard to find. However, Russell uttered it with a calm expression, "Visualization." Hubert's hand on the table clenched tightly. He adjusted his glasses and asked further, "Why do you think so?" Russell's eyes darkened slightly when he asked. He looked at his palm and replied, "Magic is..." He drew a zodiac circle in his mind. Magic helps realize something in the real world by using mana. The world categorizes this process into 4 levels. First is synchronization, where we learn the principles of natural phenomena. Next is mental image, where we visualize what we've learned in our minds and construct formulas to develop visual imagery. Finally is manifestation, where magic is realized through formula. Understanding construction and manifestation can be learned through effort and cultivation. However, mental image is not something achievable through effort alone. Breaking one's own limits to reach free imagination through courage, that is what determines the level of mental image. In Russell's mind, he imagined holding a flame in his hand. This is a flame. Then he closed his eyes and began to control it. If I consider this flame an arrow, the flame instantly transformed according to his will. Then it will become a second-tier magic fire arrow. Mana flowed above his head. Instead, if I imagine something else, it will become something completely different. In Russell's shadow was the image of a withered branch. If my imagination is not limited, suddenly, a crack appeared. The darkness shattered due to the breach of a strange creature. It left flames in its path. Then I can even create things. That don't exist in this world, fantastical, unreal things. His words silenced Hubert. That's right. A small flame appeared in Russell's palm, just like a shadow falling where the sun shines. He clenched his fist, making the flame disappear. Or hot ice. Everything originates from understanding the world. Russell confidently looked ahead. But it ends by overturning the laws of the world. His thoughts were no longer naive as before. Instead, they were profound and extensive magical insights. That is the essence of magic. Hubert looked at his determined eyes, making him exclaim, "This child, just as I thought." Professor Hubert smiled and said, "The student library is too narrow a world for you." Thanks to his approval, the system also immediately informed him that he had completed the mission. Russell was allowed into the department library. Bookshelves several meters taller than him were placed all around. While observing, Russell marveled at the vastness of this library. Just the first floor is already this big. Gentle sunlight shone on the glass door. Every space here was clean and tidy, so different from the student library. He selected some books and placed them on the table. 3-dimensional ballistic magic, advanced herbal magic. Russell happily opened the books and read them. They are very practical. His eyes lit up. He told himself while studying the information, and don't forget to mention the basic theories of magic. Suddenly, a pair of unfamiliar high heels walked towards Russell, but he remained focused on reading, not paying attention. The woman looked at the book he was reading and praised, "Oh, you're reading quite an interesting book." Russell's heart skipped a beat. His eyes widened. He quickly turned his chair to look behind him at the person, but there was no one in front of him. "What?" The woman spoke. "Over here, kid." The woman appeared in a form-fitting dress, holding a cane and wearing a hat that matched her dress. "This person is—" She smiled at him while Russell, astonished, uttered her name, Daria Snow White. Russell quickly stood up and bowed to her. "It's an honor to meet the master of the fire tower. I am Russell Raymond." Sweat poured down him. Russell only dared to sneak a glance up at Daria. She was an 8-circle mage. In this whole world, few could compare to her, even though she was over 80. But she used a huge amount of mana to maintain her youthful appearance. The foremost magic tower of the Red Magic faction, Daria Snow, White Master of Fire Magic. Darian cheerfully replied, "Oh, so you know me, kid." Russell wondered silently, "But why is she here? No need to be so tense." Darian offered a lollipop and reassured Russell, "I'm just a companion traveling the same path as you." Russell blankly pointed to himself when he saw the lollipop. "For me?" And so they walked together in the department library. Russell held the lollipop in his mouth while Darian asked him, "But how can a student like you get into the professor's library?" Russell carefully answered her, "Professor Hubert allowed me in." Darian turned and looked surprised. That stubborn fellow. Hearing the nickname she gave the professor, Russell could only smile wryly, thinking Hubert must be feeling his ears burning. Darian continued to discuss with him. "Besides, what you're studying is quite interesting." She sensed the mana flow around Russell's body and commented, "Extremely pure mana, and the mana distribution is also very stable." Darian's eyes lit up due to her inspection magic. How rare! A sense of anxiety suddenly arose in Russell's heart. Did she realize something? Darian stood beside him and reassured, "Don't worry." She still wore a very friendly smile. "I'm not here to lecture you or anything." Russell quickly bowed his head to show respect. "Thank you, ma'am." Darian's cane hit the ground with a thud. In that case, a surge of power appeared and lit up around Russell, surprising him. Darian had teleported away. She didn't forget to tell him one thing: try to develop your abilities to the fullest, kid. Russell looked up with his sparkling eyes. He was stunned for a moment before he could reply, "Yes, Master of Fire Magic." Russell stayed in the library until dusk. He carefully closed the library door, still feeling a bit emotional. "I didn't expect to meet her here." Russell smiled. What an unexpected stroke of luck! Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Isn't that Russell? Behind him were the bullies with Anton. Why is he coming out of the professor's library? Who does he think he is? Anton sneered at his friend. Well, he must have latched onto the professor, but that won't change anything. He turned his back and continued walking. Just try your best. That provocative tone hadn't changed. Whatever you do is useless anyway. Russell didn't argue with him, but just smiled to himself. The next day, during the practical magic class, all the students sat in the observation seats. The instructor talked a lot about the rules here. The first person whose name is called will step down to the arena and choose a student as their opponent. Professors usually choose the weakest student, so that student can choose someone of similar skill level. Russell heard giggles around him. In my previous life, I was always the first one called. Other students discussed loudly, it'll probably be Russell again this time. Of course he has a narrow mana channel. Some were even more obnoxious, shouting at him, Russell, please choose me. I need to raise my grade this semester. Hey, choose me, don't choose him. Quiet. The professor's shout rang out. Now I will choose a student. First up is... The crowd snickered, waiting for Russell's name to be called. But they froze and stared blankly when the name called was not him, Anton Frederick. Anton immediately stepped down the stairs amidst the bewilderment of countless students. Anton. Why is Anton going first? He walked past the professor. Both of them wore mysterious smiles. Anton whispered to him, Thanks, Professor. That professor narrowed his eyes and replied, Compared to the benefits from the Frederick Merchant Guild, this is nothing. Russell looked down there and thought, I knew it. Anton had stepped into the arena. He shifted his stance. Then Anton looked straight at the person he had targeted earlier. What are you still sitting there for? Come down here. The name Anton chose could of course be no one else. Russell crossed his arms and looked at him indifferently. Russell Raymond. Professor Hubert made himself a cup of tea, sat down, and said, If you intended to come here, you should have told me beforehand. Darian Snow White turned towards the window and looked at the scenery outside. This professor. Then Darian turned and walked inside. It's all right. She sat down on the sofa and said, Isn't it perfectly normal for a teacher to visit a student? Her finger tapped the teacup rhythmically. Darian began to ask, So you gave a kid named Russell an access to the professor's library? Hubert was very surprised when she suddenly mentioned this. That's right. Did he do something wrong? Darian lifted her teacup, her mood seemingly very good, and replied, No, it's just been a long time since I've seen something so rare. Hubert misunderstood Darian, making him look down at his hands worriedly. You're right. Russell's narrow mana flow is an abnormal condition even on this continent. Darian suddenly scolded him, You really are an idiot. Hubert, startled, asked her, What? Darian told him the truth. That child has already healed himself. What? Darian gently put down her teacup to explain to him. She touched her lips and said, The boy has already completed the second magic circle. Hubert was extremely shocked and exclaimed, Russell, he's already achieved the second magic circle. Returning to the practice arena of the practical class, Russell had stepped down to face Anton. In front of him, the system suddenly popped up a notification. This time's mission is to win the magic training session. The reward is a low-grade mana stone and unlocking the spatial compartment. Russell paid close attention to the second reward. He smiled and thought, Spatial compartment? Magic only the wealthiest mages can use. It's really useful for storing mana stones. Anton then started speaking with harsh words. Hey, you insect, haven't you realized what situation you're in if you want to live? He was no less activating his fiery mana flow. Anton, seeing Russell use mana for the first time, was extremely surprised. That magic. Could it be? In the professor's observation area, the command also rang out, Get to your positions. We will start the match. Anton immediately created a magic orb in his palm. He gritted his teeth in annoyance. A guy with a narrow mana flow achieved the second magic circle, impossible. He unleashed his second circle spell, Flame Lance, causing a large flame to shoot out. Russell watched that heat fly towards him with some surprise, but he also quickly waved his hand to create a shield. Russell's shield deflected the flame, sending it flying upwards. Russell frowned, looking at the brilliant light emanating from the fire magic. A professor, after seeing his reflex, clapped and praised, "Unbelievable." The kid wore down the shield and used its angle to protect himself from the heat. While the professor, colluding with Anton, felt extremely scared. Russell Raymond is this kid hiding his talent. Wan Chiao. Anton tensed his arm muscles to launch a fire lance. He groaned weakly. "Can you withstand this?" Suddenly, the magic Anton emitted gradually faded, making him furious. "Damn it! My firepower!" Russell noticed his abnormality and immediately seized the opportunity. "Now's the time." Russell hid one arm to unleash a second circle spell, the same fire arrow he had created before. Then Russell quickly launched his arrow. Anton, seeing the arrow fly through his layer of fire, was very surprised. Fire arrow. He immediately pulled his hand back and created a shield. He really achieved the second magic circle. The fire arrow launched by Russell had considerable power. It was like a pillar of fire crashing straight into Anton's shield. Anton trembled before that overwhelming power, but his arrogant nature still didn't make him afraid. "Damn bastard!" Before this surprise was over, he widened his eyes and looked ahead. Russell now looked incredibly fearsome. He held another arrow in his hand. This is absurd. How did he launch a second fire arrow already while the arrow whizzed past and burned fiercely, heating the air? Not just one, but countless other fire arrows flew towards Anton simultaneously. The two professors wondered to each other, "Dual casting? I'm not sure anymore." The fat professor said, "I don't think it's dual casting. Perhaps his casting speed is so fast that we mistook it for dual casting." Anton, after taking Russell's blows for a while, started to look down on him again. "Is launching fire arrows all you know?" His shield gradually turned from yellow to red. "Then there's a way." Anton cast a second circle spell, Windfire, creating a polygon around him, a special fire-resistant magic shield. Russell didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled with satisfaction. "I've been waiting for you to use this move for a long time." Anton, on his side, was still very smug with his defensive shield. "If I counterattack when his mana runs out, victory will surely be mine." Russell reached out his hand and slowly created gentle gusts of wind. Seal. A whirlwind was gathered by him in the middle of the arena. The wind force was incredibly strong. Anton, terrified, gaped and yelled, "What is this?" Russell used a second circle spell, launching it straight at Anton, making him roll his eyes and fall. Look at how he identified the shield's weakness and changed his attack magic. That fat professor's eyes lit up as he watched. "Is this still the Russell I know?" That cunning professor also sweated more and more in amazement. From behind their chairs, a familiar set of clothes stepped out to watch the match. Anton knelt on the ground, clutching his stomach and groaning like an ant. His face was scrunched up, his heart pounding repeatedly from the shock. Russell dashed in front of Anton, his fist ready with anger to give him a beating. Anton quickly tried to use a spell, but Russell's punch was faster. Lightning. He took a full punch to the stomach and immediately held his breath. Anton struggled to spit out a mouthful of saliva. His mind seemed to lose consciousness, and he couldn't see anything anymore. His arm tried to lift to cast magic, fire. Russell continued to swing his other arm forward. This punch was like a wild beast tormenting its prey, landing right on Anton's face. That professor couldn't bear it anymore, and quickly stood up. "What kind of magic is that? Stop the match immediately." But another voice interjected, "This isn't magic, is it?" Hubert calmly observed the match. "Look closely. Look at what's protecting Russell." That professor immediately turned his head and looked in the direction Hubert indicated. The aura surrounding Russell's body was very powerful. That is he using mana like a knight's magic shield? Professor Hubert smiled with satisfaction. "I don't know where the kid learned it, but he knows how to use it." Russell punched Anton in the head again. The blow, enhanced by the magic shield, made it incredibly powerful. Russell. His pupils turned bloodshot. Russell stared at him, his face full of killing intent. A second later, Komar fell straight to the ground, lying miserably on the cracked tiles. The impact of his fall with the ground was too great. Everyone witnessing this scene stared in horror. The middle-aged man with glasses also broke out in a cold sweat, thinking, "How is that possible?" A teacher, seeing him still standing there dumbfounded, asked, "What are you doing?" This made him turn his shifty face to look. It turned out to be Professor Hubert sitting beside him, laughing loudly and urging him, "Hurry up and announce the winner." That person looked at Hubert's eyes, which were closed in satisfaction, and stammered, "Ah, yes." Immediately he raised his fist high and announced loudly, "The winner is—" Russell stood with one hand in his pocket, the other wiping the corner of his mouth as his name was called, Russell Raymond. The middle-aged man hurriedly walked towards him. He raised his hand to cover his mouth, coughed dryly, and announced, "Well done. You can go now." Contrary to his wishes, Russell nonchalantly said, "It's not over yet." He asked in surprise, "What do you mean?" Russell looked at the system panel before him and slowly spoke, according to the professional rules. He began to popularize that rule to him. If the winner doesn't want to stop, they can call the next opponent. The others hearing this were so scared they broke out in a cold sweat. He stood in the arena powerfully, raising a finger to point. "Next is you." His pupils turned bloodshot again. Russell smirked provocatively. "Come here." Not long after, Professor Hubert, holding a hot teacup, stood looking through the window, muttering, 14 consecutive victories. He looked down at the pile of papers on his desk and silently praised him. "He's quite clever." He pondered thoughtfully. "Even though I've only met him once, I've already recognized Russell's mana potential." He looked at his reflection in the teacup and wondered, "Anyway, how could that student develop so quickly?" Professor Hubert recalled Russell's fierce battles and silently called his name. "Russell Raymond, you have received the Mana Stone reward." Such messages appeared continuously. Finally, a sentence, "You have received a reward," with 3 big question marks. This message surprised Russell, but he felt confused and turned to look at it. Less than a second later, the spatial pouch opened before him. Russell looked at the purple circle with some surprise. A reward inside the spatial pouch. He slowly reached his hand into that mysterious pouch. Suddenly, he saw something strange that left him speechless. Russell took out a long ancient map with a red X marked on it. Russell hesitated. "This is a map?" The system quickly appeared. Notification Mission Y. Go to the location marked on the map and carry out the assigned task. When approaching the location, UY, light will guide you. Reward for clearing the stage unknown. Mid-grade Mana Stone 10 years. Note, use after obtaining the 3rd magic circle. Russell looked at the last sentence and pondered, "Use after obtaining the 3rd magic circle." Russell recalled that circle full of strange symbols and orange-red colors, and couldn't help but think, 3rd magic circle. Before regressing, I tried countless times but never reached that level. Can I do it this time? And also, he held the map still, not knowing where the destination was. Where is this place? Russell went up the stairs to find a book in the library. If I can utilize the information in the library for professors. Finally, he took out a stack of books, harboring a glimmer of hope. Maybe I'll find some clue. Russell excitedly opened a book to read. First is the outskirts of the kingdom of Endymion. He flipped to the next page. Next is the coast of the empire. Still not finding what he wanted, his face became dejected. It must be mentioned in here, right? Records of overseas regions. Rustling sounds continuously echoed in the library, accompanied by his voice. This book. This place too. Even after looking through thousands of books, Russell still had to cover his face and lament, "Oh no. Place matches the location on that map." He walked out helplessly, rubbing his chin and cursing silently. "Damn it. I wasted too much time searching for the location on the map." He suddenly thought of something. "Now I'll focus on achieving the 3rd magic circle first." At the same time, he looked up and saw people standing in 2 rows in front, whispering about him. "Last time? Hey, look over there." Russell narrowed his eyes and looked down. "I'm not hated or bullied anymore." Although a smile was on his lips, his heart was very sad. "But I'm still a loner." Suddenly, someone called his name, Russell Raymond. Hearing that, he immediately turned his head. Professor Hubert approached, placed a hand on his shoulder, leaned down, and asked, "Can you talk to me for a moment?" He was momentarily surprised by the professor's request. Russell looked at him and then, Ed. He looked up at him, gave a bright smile, and enthusiastically replied, "Yes, sir." Outside, it was a clear blue sky with sunlight shining down on the lush green leaves. The professor's voice also rang out, "Summer break is coming soon." He poured a cup of glistening hot tea and cautiously asked him, "Do you have any plans?" Russell sat opposite him, watching him bring the teacup over, and bluntly replied, "Not yet, sir." Professor Hubert sat down on the sofa, crossed his legs, and began, "Then would you like to do a research project with me?" He was surprised and let out a, "Huh." The professor pointed to 2 books on the table. Based on your contribution, your name in the authors section will be right after mine. What do you think? Russell bent down, picked up the book, and read. It wasn't long before his eyes widened. Professor Hubert, seeing his attitude, felt confused. Russell, what are you thinking? He quickly closed the book and stammered, I'm sorry, sir. He didn't hesitate to politely refuse. Actually, I already have my own plans for this summer, sir. Professor Hubert frowned with suspicion. What do you mean? You just said you didn't have any. He handed a book to him. I have to go to this place. Professor Hubert looked down and slowly read, Going on vacation to, he exclaimed in surprise, Mandiva. After a while, Russell climbed onto a carriage and the old man also drove the horse away. He sat in the palanquin looking out the window. Russell inhaled a breath of fresh air from nature. He summoned the spatial pouch. It's quite a long way. I need to eat something to be sure. Russell took something red and put it in his mouth. This will fill my stomach. The old man outside while driving the horse wiped his sweat. It's summer so hot indeed. Suddenly, a red aura emanated from his carriage, making the old man exclaim, Strange! It turned out to be the aura from Russell. He closed his eyes and resolved in his heart, Before reaching Mandiva, I will achieve the third magic circle. Professor Hubert was still pensive in his room. How strange. He put his hand to his chin thinking, the kid is also going to Mandiva. It's probably a good thing. He thought of a sun-drenched beach with a blue cocktail on the table. Then, the image of a woman in a white shirt, shorts, and platinum blonde hair, sunbathing with a tray of pastries and a cocktail beside her, made him think to himself, she's probably in Mandiva already, at Mandiva Beach. Endymion, a voice echoed amidst the clear blue sky and crystal clear seawater, my homeland is always this beautiful. That person lay stretched out on a chair by the seashore, looking very relaxed. A middle-aged woman with platinum blonde hair gently swirled the wine in her glass, enjoying the scenery. How long has it been since I've enjoyed a complete vacation like this? She brought the cocktail to her lips and took a sip, her tone weary. First protecting the empire, then lecturing on magic research, and also training my students. She remembered that year when she was an authoritative woman standing before the students, and they had to look up in fear. The counting sounds rang out 9, 6, 3. Then she held out her palm, summoning a red aura that swirled around. She, in a white outfit accented with red along with gloves and a red-brimmed hat, looked at the spiritual energy in her hand and explained, For all mages, there are 3 numbers that carry extremely significant meaning. The students looked surprised. She recalled that card that overcame 1,000 obstacles. The number 9 represents the end point of a lifetime's pursuit of the magical path. The second set of 8 cards is for fighting monsters. The number 6 represents the completion of the 6th magic circle and the difficulties one must endure to become a grand mage. Next is the card of a person standing under an ancient tree. And the number 3 marks the opening of the first page when humans begin to walk the path of magic alone. She gently placed her drink on the table. Speaking of being alone, I just remembered. Arms crossed over her chest, she wondered, I wonder if that child is living well now. The person she remembered was none other than a young man with blood-red eyes, Russell Raymond. On Russell's side, the old man stopped the carriage and said, We've arrived, sir. Not seeing Russell, he worried, Why hasn't he gotten out of the carriage yet? Then he stammered, calling him, Sir, you can get out of the carriage now. The old man then shouted in alarm, Sir! A moment later, a hand was firmly holding a piece of bread. Russell held bread in one hand and a sausage in the other, eating greedily. He ate while wiping his mouth, looking at a pile of delicious food before him, sighing internally, I accidentally used too much power to stabilize my rampant mana. Russell took a sip of water and remembered when he fainted. Luckily, the old coachman helped me. He supported him while shouting, Sir, please wake up. He took the cup of water and chugged it. But well, I finally achieved it. After finishing, he slammed the cup down on the table. Russell summoned his blazing red spiritual power. He smirked. Third magic circle? A red circle with strange symbols gradually emerged. He was also quite surprised by his own ability. He didn't expect to break through his limits in just a few months before returning. Russell picked up 2 coins on the table and told himself, but just this much isn't enough to be complacent. He lowered his head, determined, I must go further. Russell held the map in his hand, his head aching as he thought, I know I have to find the marked locations on the map, but this is still the first time. Suddenly, a shout from outside caught his attention. Pompeo Volcano Tour, with the most professional guides, huge discount only for today. Legend has it that this majestic Pompeo volcano was originally just an ordinary mountain. It turned into a volcano because one day a special creature came to reside here. Russell looked at the scene before him and pondered. That thing just stayed, and it changed the nature of an entire region. He looked at the blazing red mountain with the shadow of a monster and speculated, then in this world there's only one creature with that ability. That monster in his mind was a ferocious fire dragon, the fire dragon. At the same time, the guide was wearing a dragon-shaped hat and making growl sounds a few times. Everyone around was very excited, clapping continuously, while Russell's face darkened. All right, I'll split from the group here. Just as he was about to leave, the guide raised his hand and announced, "We're preparing to move on." He silently leaped off the cliff while the guide was still speaking, the next location. A few seconds later, that person became bewildered. Where did one person go missing? Russell's feet sank into the clear blue seawater. He looked at the giant waterfall ahead, thinking, I disregarded it all. The reward and the potential for my own growth after the mission. Russell stood before the waterfall holding the map. It's precisely because of this. He smiled contentedly. Because it's related to dragons. Suddenly, a golden light flew up from the map. They continuously flew up and clung to each other, instantly forming a golden gem. Then it shot forward to Russell's amazement. He watched that strong light skim quickly over the water and wondered, could this be the guiding light? After a moment, it dived straight into the water. Russell let out a sigh. So it's in the waterfall. He quickly swung his hand behind him, summoning a bright circle. He shouted, Wind Arrow. Instantly, his weapon was created from that circle and shot straight into the waterfall, clearing a path for him. Russell took the opportunity to fly inside. He walked through the cave, rubbing his head. Who would have thought there's a cave formed from lava rock in here? Just like that, he strode along looking for what he needed, but after a short distance, he grew worried. The rule says I have to wait until after achieving the third magic circle to try, but I don't see any monsters or beasts in here, do I? Russell stepped to the corner of a wall. He looked up at the rather imposing but abandoned walls and wondered. A ruin. He placed his hand on a pillar with green roots climbing up it and felt it. I wonder how long it has existed. Suddenly, a strange sound made him prick up his ears to listen. He turned to look at the dazzling golden light in the middle of a gate. On both sides were two stone statues placed as guards. He exclaimed, Here it is, I kept wondering where you were. Turns out, you're here. Russell slowly approached it. His footsteps quickened. Suddenly, he sensed something very strange behind him. His heart was filled with unease. Damn it, did I forget my mercenary instincts? I let my guard down. He frowned and glanced behind him. I should have realized it. If there are no monsters around here, beasts, or even any sound, it means this territory is being suppressed by an extremely powerful creature. Instantly, a giant dragon stared straight at him. Russell was stunned. A Komodo dragon. It roared fiercely. It whipped its tail straight back. Its power was enough to break the pillar in two. Russell quickly flew upwards silently, calling its name Komodo Dragon. He stared wide-eyed at it. It's a monster that requires at least 2 mercenary squads to handle. Just as he landed, the dragon charged again. Russell barely had time to think of a plan. The only thing I can do now is run. Russell opened his palm, summoning his azure spiritual energy. He planted one foot firmly, his hands enveloped in blue lightning, preparing his ultimate move. Second, magic, circle, lightning, arrow. That dragon crawled towards him roaring. Russell gritted his teeth, holding his long, sharp weapon in his hand. He used all his strength and swung it straight at it. The arrow immediately pierced straight into the middle of the dragon's forehead. The dragon stood up, roaring in pain amidst Russell's lightning aura. He took the opportunity to dash away. I'll buy some time with that move. Russell ran for his life towards the gate from earlier. I'll run straight to the stone gate. Suddenly, 2 spears crossed to form an X. A voice rang out, Prove you are worthy to enter the gate with your mana. Russell gaped at this scene and cursed, What the hell? He glanced at the dragon that had chased him from behind with a terrible roar, and I am blocked by these 2 spears. He thought to himself, I can't get through. Russell stomped his foot hard on the ground, creating a blazing red aura. If I can't avoid it, he raised his left hand. His right 2 fingers touched his left wrist, forming a golden spiritual power. His pupils also turned golden, his whole body again, enveloped in a deadly red aura. Then I just need to create my own path. From his wrist, a fire arrow gradually formed. Russell, within the sharp red aura, created a second magic circle, fire arrow. The red gem on the gate gradually absorbed his red spiritual energy. Suddenly, the dragon widened its eyes and looked at that gem. It seemed to be affected by something and stopped bowing its head. Russell aimed the fire arrow at it, but the dragon didn't move at all. He wondered, why did it stop? The dragon suddenly stood upright, startling Russell. It stomped 1 foot hard on the ground, its eyes looking down. Then its whole body collapsed, bowing before Russell. Russell was even more bewildered. What's happening? The 2 spears before the gate also opened. A voice rang out, "You have proven yourself?" The gem on the gate shone brightly, emitting an incredibly powerful aura in front of Russell. After a moment, he clutched his head and moaned, "Ugh, my head." Russell then opened his eyes to look around and was surprised again. The scenery had changed. He placed his hand on a sheet of ice so clear he could see his reflection, and softly asked, "Ice." He knelt on the ice floor surrounded by giant stone statues and confusedly asked, "Where am I?" He glanced around. "Is that teleportation magic? I was just in the cave?" Suddenly, a strange sound attracted his attention. He looked up at a strange blazing red weapon bound by several chains and muttered, "That is—" The system also appeared at this moment. Notification received Mission 2. Defeat all ice golems in the area and pass the trial of the fire gate. Trial reward, secret reward, mid-grade mana stone, 10 years. He exclaimed in shock. Ice golems, Russell. He turned his head to look to the side. Those stone statues gradually moved. Russell muttered, "The golems," meaning they forcefully broke the ice layers on their bodies. The ice golems immediately surrounded him, enclosing the small Russell. He was horrified. "I have to fight all of them." As soon as he finished speaking, he summoned a fire arrow in his hand. He swung his arm straight to the side. "Damn it, isn't this a bit too harsh?" The blazing red fire arrow, following his command, shot forward. It flew straight into the chest of an ice golem. He looked at the hazy dust before him after that collision and calculated, "To kill a golem, I have to destroy its core." The flames and ice turned to ash in an instant. A butt appeared in his mind. The ice golem he had just hit suddenly sat up. He looked at its chest with trepidation. "I only made a crack." Russell gritted his teeth looking at the situation. "How hard is the ice that made it?" He raised his hand again, summoning another spiritual power. "If fire doesn't work." Gusts of wind immediately swirled around his hand. "Then I'll use wind." But something made him pause. "What?" At this moment, the ice golem had rushed towards him, raising both hands to the sky. He worried, "Can't I cast magic?" Russell aggressively raised his palm towards it. Lightning. Several bolts of lightning came and went in an instant, making him curse. "Shit!" That ice golem punched the floor, shattering the ice on it and sending fragments flying everywhere. Luckily, he dodged to the side. Russell retreated a few steps, his face full of scratches after being hit by ice shards. He thought of the system, that previous notification. A line of text caught his attention. Destroy all golems in the area and pass the trial of fire. The golem raised both arms to grab him. Dodging and thinking back on the fire challenge, he figured he was limited to fire magic alone. Suddenly, his foot caught on a rock. He painfully leaned against the wall. A group of powerful golems charged towards him. He clutched his shoulder, his whole body trembling, and said, "What a terrible hobby." He raised his hand to wipe the streaks of blood from his forehead. Russell quickly summoned third circle magic firebolt. His eyes sharpened all right. He burst into flames under the gaze of the ice golems, and he firmly declared, "I'll do it." Bolts of magma were launched. It was fired powerfully from the middle of the golem's chest. That thing created a massive explosion, engulfing the surroundings in thick smoke and dust, forcing him to huddle in the corner of the wall to avoid contact. The golem, seeing this, looked up with some surprise. Suddenly, Russell's pupils widened, his eyes seemingly contemplating something. Suddenly, a giant lava beam shot towards the golem. Its destructive power seemed many times greater than the previous beams. This thing shattered the golem's massive body. His arm was still in the attacking posture from before. He panted tiredly and thought, "I've only dealt with 2 so far." Still lost in thought. "At this rate, I'll run out of energy before I can defeat all of them." While he was busy thinking, the golems began to awaken again. Part of Russell's face was covered in blood. His whole body looked indescribably tired. "I need to find another way." A golem swung its giant fist at him. The impact created a chaotic area, forcing Russell to turn and run to dodge. He thought about a solution while imagining the image behind the golem appearing with a soldier below swinging a weapon. He was destroying something belonging to another soldier. To instantly shatter their solid ice, I need to concentrate my power at one point. Suddenly, Russell's eyes widened unusually. Perhaps he had thought, in the end, the answer is still density. He acted while thinking, first, I'll run far away to cast magic. He quickly moved to another position, his speed so fast it left no shadow. He ran behind the golems. And then, Russell's hands faced each other horizontally. Start with fire arrow. Between them was a spark shaped like a weapon. Along with the formula to amplify it, he quickly executed his thought externally. The spark from before was magnified. Continue upgrading. I'll add the fire lightning simulation formula to it. The end of the spark began to glow red. More sparks of similar shape appeared. Russell frowned slightly. And finally, he reached out his hand to control the surrounding sparks. Unite all of these. 5 weapons formed by flames hovered in the air. Around them were sparks swirling into rings. His thoughts peaked at this moment. Compression formula. Russell used both hands to push the 5 of them together. His eyes were completely white. He was currently focusing all his strength into his hands to help them all merge. Suddenly, the golem's foot stepped forward, creating a tremor on the ground. Then it swung its arm, preparing to punch Russell. On his side, he was still struggling with those 5 weapons and shouted, "Damn it, please, please, merge!" Suddenly, rays of light emanated from something. Perhaps his hope had become reality. The golem's legs from before seemed to have become unsteady. The other golems only now looked up. A large hole appeared in the middle of its chest. This made it start to drop its arms. Pieces of the golem shattered and fell everywhere, while Russell now firmly held the newly merged spear in his hand. His pupils turned golden, shining brightly amidst his other features. He held the spear and pointed it forward. His eyes looked distantly with a hint of indifference. The system displayed a notification. Your understanding of the fire element has surpassed the limit. Your understanding of the mid-tier fire element has significantly increased. Russell slightly turned his head to glance at the spear in his hand, taller than his head, and thought, I can feel it. Its power is at least close to a 5th circle magic. His hand gripped the spear shaft tighter. Just maintaining the spear consumes a large amount of energy. His whole body quickly shifted into a running stance. So I'll fight first. He and the spear in his hand charged towards the golems. His face became rigid, his expression looking extremely stern. He flew to attack them in order. Each golem was pierced through the chest by the spear's blazing red fire stream. Then Russell landed in the middle of them. Half of them had been defeated by him and were gradually shattering. The other half stood tall, their blazing red eyes shining straight down at him. He glanced with his burning golden eyes. 4 on the left. A burning orange light emitted. The spear streaked through a beautiful line of fire, cutting the golem in half. Thanks to that, he shattered 2 golems at once. He thought to himself, now it's 2. Suddenly, a green slash swept past, forcing him to lean to the side to dodge. One of the 2 remaining golems began to attack. It shot a white energy beam from its chest down to the floor, causing cracks to appear on the floor. With a determined face, Russell raised the spear high, preparing his stance. If I just defeat this one. He rushed forward and slashed from the golem's head. Its body split vertically. Then he returned to his position, panting and thinking, now for the last one. Suddenly his eyes darted to one side. Perhaps he had discovered something. The last golem shot an energy beam at him, which made him fall into the pile of golem corpses. Cuff, if I hadn't blocked that blow with my spear, I would have been killed instantly. He looked down at the trembling spear in his hand. Now it's gradually disappearing. Only a little energy is left. Then he stood up and walked, holding the spear with both hands to one side. His eyes had returned to their blazing red. Russell's face was stern as he thought, if that's the case. His hand gripped the spear tightly. He held it and brought it behind him, preparing to charge at the golem, shouting, this is my final blow. The golem's mouth opened wide. Its whole body seemed to be retreating. He executed the attack while thinking, please. All his efforts so far seemed to be wagered on this final blow. Russell's eyes were full of determination as he shouted internally, reach it. The spear's golden flame quickly advanced towards the golem, piercing through. Then the spear disappeared. He could only stand and watch, hoping. The golem appeared hazy with white smoke and red flames. Russell looked straight at it. A large hole was pierced in its chest. Finally, the golem was defeated. He wore a tired expression and said, His eyes were white. His whole face seemed to be falling. I did it. His whole body lay collapsed on the chaotic floor. The system displayed a notification, you have completed the mission. You will now receive your reward. you will receive low-grade Energy Stone X12 and lowest-grade Energy Stone X13 as rewards. You will receive a reward. The trial reward is the Horn of the Forgotten King. At this moment, the status bar displayed the notification, you have received a reward. From above, a red object bound by chains moved restlessly. As soon as it fell, the external chains all broke. The red object it enveloped burst into large flames, the fire so big it seemed to want to burn everything. At this moment, the status bar displayed the notification, Horn of the Forgotten King Fire Essence. Immediately, the burning horn emitted a dazzling light that enveloped the entire space. The young man, his face still covered in bloody wounds, lay there unconscious. On the status bar, text displayed, entering the subconscious of the Forgotten King to receive the reward. After the system notification, he slowly opened his eyes, weary, his face covered in blood, his eyes showing clear despondency and lifelessness. His two arms were suspended in mid-air by glowing golden chains. He tried to steady himself to see where this place was. The status bar continuously displayed, you have received a reward Horn of the Forgotten King Fire Essence, entering the subconscious of the Forgotten King to receive the reward. He wondered, the Forgotten King, isn't that the horn of the fire dragon? His arms were tightly bound. He continued to speak, but is this really a reward? I feel like I'm being tortured. A sinister, threatening voice rang out. If you can withstand the trial of fire and reach the subconscious of a supreme being. He was in too much pain to speak, his face covered in sweat, his expression showing astonishment. His mind raced. Cough, are these the remaining thoughts? I feel like my head is about to split. At this moment, that voice rang out again. I grant you the fragment of the king. Instantly, the red horn emitting burning fire advanced towards him, making him flinch. The sharp tip of the horn aimed straight at him and attacked. Bound by chains, he could do nothing but shout in confusion. What? The very next second, the horn pierced straight into his stomach with great force. He was in so much pain that he opened his mouth and roared, "Kyuk!" His eyes widening as much as possible, as if nothing could be more agonizing than this moment. The horn continued to pierce deeper and deeper into his stomach, even though it was burning fiercely. His whole body exploded with power and agony. A fiery light emanated from his entire being. Even his eyes shone with intense light. He roared in pain, but contrary to that pain, the voice rang out, use this power. His whole body seemed to overflow with power, exploding with dazzling light. He screamed endlessly in pain. The light enveloped and illuminated a vast space. Behind that light was the image of an evil dragon staring intently at him. Overcoming that pain, it was now morning. The seawater ebbed and flowed with a fresh sound. He lay sprawled on the beach. When he woke up, he smelled the salt of the sea and was somewhat surprised as he observed his surroundings. He stood up and wiped the dirt from his face. Ugh, he wondered, where am I? He looked into the distance at buildings with sea blue roofs that suited this place very well. He noticed them. Is this Mandiva? He ran a hand through his hair, somewhat speechless, asking himself, what happened there? The status bar continuously displayed notifications. You have absorbed the Horn of the Forgotten King and reached the limit. The amount of mana exceeding the limit you can absorb is potential. Mid-level understanding of the fire attribute has reached the limit and will become high-level understanding of the fire attribute. He seriously read all the notifications. Then he clenched his fist. An incredibly huge amount of red mana enveloped him. He looked at that red color and thought, is this my mana? I can almost see how close I am to the fourth magic circle. He sighed in relief and said, compared to what I went through there, this reward is top-notch. Suddenly, a voice rang out, attracting his attention. Nice to meet you here, kid. Russell, a middle-aged woman with platinum blonde hair. He saw her and spoke, Lady Darian, Snow White. The two stood at a nearby water counter talking. She spoke first. I sensed a sudden explosion of mana, so I came here to check. As she spoke, she handed him a drink. And found you here, kid. He smiled cheerfully and said, thank you, ma'am. I didn't think I'd meet you here, Tower Master. She sized him up with sharp eyes. The kid almost reached the fourth magic circle in such a short time. She speculated while proving each of her deductions. His mana is even purer. The kid is basically a genius. He put down his drink and asked, so what brought you to Mandiva, Tower Master Manhwa? She looked towards the sea and those tall buildings and said, not many people know, but this is my homeland. Hearing that, he was a bit surprised and asked again, your homeland, ma'am, she replied immediately. Yes, that's why I come back here every summer. But Russell, what brought you here, kid? He looked at her and thought, I guess it's too early to tell her the truth. He scratched his head with a well sound. Then he placed his hand on his chest and said confidently, I just came here to admire more of the world. Hearing that, she replied, Oh, I see. But in her mind she thought, should I test this kid's abilities? She offered him the glass of water and said, So would you mind helping me with something, kid? Hearing that he was confused, she snapped her fingers and fire particles immediately surrounded them. His whole body was enveloped by that flame, making him a bit surprised. Immediately after, a symbol appeared on his cloak. He looked at it and thought, this is the symbol of the fire tower. She picked up her drink and continued to enjoy it, smiling at him and saying, Don't worry, it's something you can do. Then the status bar displayed the notification, Mission Darien Snow White's test. Help her fight against the slaver ship with pirates at Mandiva Port and pass her test. Completion reward, mid-grade mana stone. After reading it, he was a bit surprised. Pirates. On the ship now, some people were discussing matters. She said to him, I guess you've already realized, but Endymion strictly prohibits slavery. At this moment in the prison, people were locked up with soldiers guarding outside. That's why we don't allow slaver ships to dock at our ports. On the ship, the traffickers were moving goods, she continued. But unfortunately, some ships have approached the port to anchor. Some even try to anchor near Mandiva. The two of them were now sitting on a mana-powered boat. She explained everything to him. Of course, I can do this myself. When she said this, her face became a bit more serious, but the purpose of this plan is to rescue the victims and take the ship. It needs a detailed plan. Hearing this, he spoke up. So, we need to lure and attack. Hearing that, she praised him. Kid, you catch on quite quickly. He fell silent for a moment, thinking about something. He looked towards the large ship not far from them and thought, if it were the Tower Master asking for help, hundreds of mages would rush over, even barefoot ones. At this moment, she used her mana to cast a spell on the ship ahead. He continued to think, considering how she specifically asked for my help then. He looked toward the ship, certain that this was definitely a test. By now their boat had approached very close to the ship. She called out, Russell. Then she turned back to instruct him. What happens from now on might be a bit much for you, kid. She spoke to him sternly, but the path of a guardian won't always be smooth and grand. He listened attentively to her teachings. She turned back, smiled, and said, This is just another fate for us mages. With that, she stepped one foot onto the edge of the boat. Then she jumped onto the ship, turned to him and said, Now I'll draw their attention, and you in the meantime will go rescue the people. After giving instructions, she dashed off to follow the plan they had prearranged. He seriously contemplated her words, the path of a guardian. She flew high above the ship, looking down. Then, extremely pleased, she smiled, held her staff and said, All right, I should cast around here. Next, her whole body emanated a powerful mana. Her eyes glowed as she cast a spell. The next second, the entire sky around the ship blazed with a dazzling color. She stood in midair, casting and controlling mana while shouting loudly at him, Go, go, kid! At this moment, a shout rang out, shaking the entire ship. She's attacking! Everyone on the ship gathered, preparing their weapons to attack her. One person ordered, Hurry up! The sailors took their positions, drawing their crossbows and aiming straight at her to attack. A leader raised his sword high and ordered with a loud shout, Fire a big one! A large mana orb emanated a dazzling light from the top of the ship. Seeing everyone in such chaos, she was extremely pleased and couldn't help but smirk. The people on the ship were fundamentally no match for her. Their attacks were ineffective. One of them cursed loudly, Damn it, it can't reach her. At this moment, she was a little angry, and her hands emanated a crimson mana. She said furiously, You damn scoundrels daring to hide in my territory. With that, she extended her hand and blew out mana fire particles that spread through the air and then fell. The small embers followed the wind and fell onto the ship, causing those men to panic. She added, Let's see if your abilities are as great as your courage. The embers had fallen into the ship's hold and burst into flames right under their feet. They suddenly shouted, What the? Then they scrambled to stomp out the fire with their feet, but it was basically useless. The more they stomped, the bigger the fire grew. They shouted while forcefully stomping on the embers, What did you do? The flames then spread up his leg as he tried to stomp them out. At this moment, on another side, a hand gripped the edge of the ship and climbed up. Taking advantage of the chaos, he stealthily jumped inside without anyone noticing. Suddenly, a loud shout drew his attention. Move quickly. He looked towards the source of the voice. It was the embers continuously burning on the ship's deck. Those men picked up axes and aimed straight at the embers to attack. Daria's magic had covered this entire area. He aimed straight at the ember and brought his axe down, splitting it in two. However, it suffered no damage at all and immediately returned to its original form. He thought to himself, I can see it existing in human form. Then before he could launch another attack, the flame rushed forward and latched onto his leg, attacking. Immediately, his entire body was engulfed in flames. His pained screams echoed through the heavens and earth. Witnessing that scene, he was extremely surprised. In just the blink of an eye, it had happened. The remaining people on the deck were also incredibly surprised, unable to believe their eyes. It's transformed into that shape, but he turned away, no longer watching, and focused on his plan. Anyway, now is not the time to be astonished. He opened the hatch and went down his mind, constantly thinking, I have to rescue the people controlled by Daria first. In the dungeon at this moment, they probably still didn't know what was about to happen. The prison guard sat there nonchalantly and said, What in the world is happening? Suddenly, the voices of the prisoners in the cells cried out, The Navy is here, we're saved. The sound of a sword striking the iron bars of the cell rang out with a piercing noise. The jailer outside raised his sword threateningly. No matter what happens, don't you dare think of escaping from here. The threat made the people in the cell tremble in fear, hugging themselves and not daring to say anything more. He slung his sword over his shoulder threateningly. Remember that. Just then something shot towards him from behind. A hand grabbed his neck from behind, startling him so much he couldn't react in time. His face became fearsome. His sharp eyes uttered only one word, lightning. As soon as he finished speaking, the man's entire body was shocked by a blue electric current. Until his body smoked, white smoke came from his mouth, and his eyes rolled back, unable to say anything more. When he let go, the man immediately collapsed. He sighed and thought, as expected, there's no one left upstairs. A prisoner in the cell clinging to the iron bars said, You came to save us. Hearing the voice, he shifted his attention to the cell. He nodded slightly and said, Yes, but we have to wait until the pirates are all gone. It will be safer here now. Hearing that, she immediately knelt down, clasped her hands above her head, and kowtowed in gratitude. O Divine One, you have heard my prayers. He looked down at the unconscious man beside him, then looked around thinking, I wonder how many people are locked up in this tiny place. Suddenly, as if discovering something, he was startled and his eyes widened. His attention fell upon a young boy huddled in the cell. He was surprised. They even sell this child as a slave. He gritted his teeth in anger, the angles of his face becoming prominent, and cursed, Damn dogs! The very next second, a group of people rushed in, pointing at him and shouting, Who's there? The sudden voices startled him, but immediately after they noticed the corpse of a man lying beside it. Those men, realizing it was their comrade, were extremely surprised and shouted, What, him? One of them quickly drew his sword, pointed it at him, and roared, Get that bastard! As soon as he finished speaking, a series of men from behind rushed towards him, attacking as if for revenge. He cast mana, creating a blue stream of light, his face full of indignation, saying, I'm the one who's going to catch you. Then he chanted an incantation. Magic circle, lightning chains. Immediately all of them were bound by blue chains and shocked violently. All of them were knocked down, not a single one spared. He slowly approached. One, barely breathing, struggled to say, You're a mage. He was about to say more. If the commander comes, then... But before he could finish, the protagonist uttered, lightning, and electrocuted him to death. He stepped into a cell and gently pushed the door open. He stood before the iron bars of the cell and said, This cell, it was very dark inside. A voice rang out, Are you a mage from the fire tower? He spoke lightning. A glowing orb in his hand illuminated every corner of the space. He looked down at the person imprisoned in the room and realized it was an elf. He immediately stood up and said, So you're a mage from the fire tower, huh? He remembered the symbol on his clothes and vaguely understood, Oh, it turns out they saw this symbol. He immediately put his hand to his chest and replied, No, I'm not a member of the fire tower. Before he could finish, the elf cut him off. Anyone will do. He stood before the iron bars, his expression arrogant, and ordered him, Open this door. Hearing that, he felt a bit annoyed and the expression on his face changed. He thought, It's true I want to open the door for them, but this guy's voice is really annoying. Looking at his arrogant and conceited face, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. Even in this situation, he's still like that. Hearing it makes me want to just leave. An elf with platinum blonde hair spoke up. Be careful with your behavior. She was Yahello, her voice carrying a hint of confusion. As soon as she stood up to speak, the person next to her rushed to support her. He's not an ordinary person. She approached the iron bars, looked at his surprised expression and said, possessing such pure mana, like a flash of lightning at dawn, this person. She smiled gently, her beauty captivating, and said, I can sense the scent of spirits from him. Yahello spoke up asking, not an ordinary person. The blonde-haired person with a surprised look asked, what do you mean? Yahello rested her chin on her hand, thought for a moment, and said, I can smell the scent of spirits in his body. Russell looked at her with a puzzled expression. Scent of spirits. A person wearing a hat that covered their face spoke up in disbelief. Impossible. The blonde-haired young man also asked, the scent of spirits emanating from a human. He brought his hand to his nose and sniffed it. I don't smell anything, do I? A voice rang out, causing Russell to stop. Mage of the Fire Tower. Yahello turned to look at the blonde-haired young man. He stood there flustered and silent. He approached Russell, bowed his head sincerely and said, please save us from here. Everyone inside also bowed their heads and said in unison, we beg you. He was surprised by the scene and remained silent, thinking, elves famous for their arrogance change just because of her words. Russell looked at Yahello, who was bowing her head, and thought to himself, could she be a high-ranking elf, or even more than that? In the darkness, a rattling sound was heard. He reached out, took the lock, and slowly destroyed it. Guardian? She approached Russell and asked, have you defeated all the pirates and their boss? He looked at Yahello with confusion and asked, boss? Elsewhere, someone who had been defeated lay collapsed on the floor. They're still strong. The other person holding a weapon turned their head. Stronger than even warriors proficient in magic. Looking towards the wide-open door, he shouted. The other one gave a sinister smile. On the deck, the space was extremely chaotic. People were fighting and killing each other. Damn it, Someone stood above the ship's control area. Fire magic, huh? Interesting. He reached behind his back and drew his sword from its sheath. Then he kicked off forcefully and leaped down. He swung his sword, cutting through the flames. His feet landed gently on the ship's deck. Holding his weapon, he angrily stepped forward and spoke. The people around him started to cheer. You're struggling just because of these kinds of attacks. It's the leader. The people below, seeing him, started shouting loudly. The leader is here. You're done for, old hag. We'll tear you into 100 pieces. She stood high above, looking down with a calm face, and said, interesting. The figure quickly dashed away. Pink streams of power enveloped her legs, and she gently landed below. The people below, seeing this, were all terrified. She stood high above, holding her staff, and looked down at the people below. The leader of that group looked at her, laughed, and asked, are you closing the distance between us? She also laughed and replied, it seems you're indeed the leader. He suddenly laughed loudly. That's right. I am the captain of this ship, Don Click. His entire body was covered by a red stream of power. Looking at how you use aura, you must have been a knight. What are you doing here? Don Click lowered his head, covered his face, and laughed loudly. Does the title of knight even bring in enough money to eat and pay taxes? Then he looked up at the sky and shouted loudly, we Click brothers have made a fortune from slave trading. Hearing him say that, she was startled and asked, brothers? Don Click just gripped the sword in his hand without saying anything. He rushed quickly towards her, his eyes blazing red. Now is the time. A slash was delivered, streaking past her body. The attack struck the ship's wall hard, causing it to crack. A voice rang out, startling Russell. Too dangerous. The wall cracked, sending dust and debris flying. His figure appeared behind the cloud of dust. Russell retreated, creating a protective circle. What is this? 2 spears appeared beneath his feet. Spears. Someone came from nowhere, laughed, and said, you didn't get hit, huh? He reached out and took the sword. He must also be a mage. He stood inside the protective circle, thinking, aura from a sword? Is he a knight? A notification board appeared. Difficult battle, first battle against a swordsman. The situation is very difficult, but defeat your opponent. Reward for clearing medium-level Monostone X5. Yahello stood behind Russell and reminded him, Guardian, be careful. Looking at the man smiling sinisterly in front of her, she said, he is the vice-captain of this ship. The other man smirked, but then sighed. Even if you're a mage, you're still just a snot-nosed kid. With that, he kicked the person lying at his feet. You didn't kill them, but kicked them out. If you had won, you should have finished them off. He smiled sinisterly, pointing his sword at him. I'll show you. Russell silently used his power without answering him. Streams of lightning enveloped his body. Fire magic has a very large area of effect damage. If so, Russell used his power, causing the room to be covered in lightning bolts. Triple lightning spell circle. He thrust his sword tip down into the ship's deck. Using lightning strikes to fight a swordsman, huh? A powerful slash was delivered. On the other side, his lightning bolts rushed forward. The wooden floorboards burst and flew into the air. You've really lost your mind. His eyes blazing red darted through the lightning bolts. But Russell gritted his teeth and threw a punch. Why isn't my attack working on him? Triple lightning spell circle. Lightning bolts continuously flew towards him. You can't do anything to me? He brought out his sword to block Russell's lightning bolts. The sword clashed with the lightning bolts but remained unharmed. He looked at the scene before him in surprise. He's unaffected by lightning magic. The sword was swung forcefully down towards Russell's head. Thanks to the protective circle, the sword only struck that circle. The sword struck the protective circle hard, nearly cracking it. He looked at his protective circle worriedly, thinking, my shield. Russell raised his hand to the crack in the shield. The slash broke the protective circle and rushed quickly towards him. Outside the ship, the leader's slash was rushing towards her. Her entire body suddenly turned into fire, surprising him. Fire. Don Click turned back to look at her and clicked his tongue. He spoke up asking, a mage, huh? You're good at running. Daria didn't answer but asked him back. Let me ask you a question. Are your brothers also knights? Don Click raised his sword to eye level. That's right, but of course not as good as me. Daria scoffed. Oh really? He angrily slammed his sword into the floor. Without a word, Daria focused the surrounding destructive fire energy to summon. Origin Daria Snow White. He continuously slashed at the summoned spirits, then charged straight at Daria. Embers flared up, angering him, and he swung his sword forcefully. Dwarves burning fire again. She looked mysterious, her lips moving slightly. No, this time it will be a bit different. Hearing that, Don Click paused for a moment. In the flames, the shape of something was being regenerated. Two dwarves appeared, startling him. Two of them. One of them held an axe as a weapon. The more they slashed, the more of them appeared. It wasn't just two. Many of them appeared and surrounded Don Click. The origin of Snow White Daria Hellfire Dwarves. Her eyes blazed red and her mouth curled up slightly. They rushed to attack, slightly surprising him. Don Click quickly turned his head to look. Impossible. Behind Daria, another figure appeared. Why is the Fire Tower sorceress appearing here? The shield shattered, blood splattering everywhere. That man's sword slammed hard onto the ship's deck. He then turned his face to look at Russell. His eyes widened with complete surprise. He looked at him, clutching his chest and panting heavily. Did he dodge that blow? He frowned, remembering the previous attack. It should have been cut in half. Russell placed his hand on his chest and used his power. It surrounded itself with defensive magic to strengthen its body. The other one looked at him with a scheming expression. Whatever it is, it's useless. It's just like a mouse caught in a trap. Elo stood behind the bars, looking at Russell with worry. Guardian. He was having so much difficulty he couldn't breathe. Knight. Russell remembered a past event. I met him in a previous life. He slaughtered a group of innocent mercenaries just because they bumped into his shoulder. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his injured arm, breathing with difficulty. A white-haired man approached and stood in front of him. The two looked at each other. The only one who can stop him is a mage. The other one started to attack. The white-haired man immediately used a shield to block the blow. He smiled and extended his hand to block. And the way that person uses it is, his fingers began to move. Russell continued to create another shield, layering a barrier. The other one struck the shield with great force. The shield continued to shatter. Another shield up. The sword immediately slipped in another direction. He looked surprised. It blocked it. He drew his hand back, concentrating his power. A powerful blow struck the other's stomach. Second spell, Circle Magic Arrow. He was hit hard and then sent flying far away. His entire body slammed hard against the wall, causing him to cough up blood. Russell, one hand covering his face and the other leaning against the wall, staggered. He panted heavily, looking down at his hand. Have I lost too much blood? Russell reached out, crushed the lock, and said, Everyone leave. Elo, along with two people in cloaks, approached and bowed to him. Thank you, Guardian. Thank you. Russell extended his hand in front of her. If you're all right, then follow me. Suddenly, a voice cut him off. This little brat. He sprang up from the rubble, startling the group. His eyes were bloodshot. You should have cut my head off, shouldn't you? Russell looked at him in confusion, thinking to himself, I did it correctly. He spread his arms to shield Yahello. Please take the captured people upstairs. The two people behind her seemed to disagree, but she clasped her hands in agreement. You want us to release the humans? You want it, fine guardian. The other one reached out, rubbed the back of his neck, and laughed loudly. Still have time to rescue slaves. In the blink of an eye, he had dashed off very quickly. A fearsome face. He launched a powerful attack while Russell quickly created a shield. Worry about yourself first. The weapon gradually sank deeper into the shield. He continuously struck his shield. I won't give it any chance to counterattack. That guy gave a wicked smile, his eyes glowing red in the darkness. The attacks came out continuously. Shield, 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 shield. Yahello and the other two quickly went to rescue the slaves. I have to hold on. They started distributing keys to each other to open the doors. The captured people were also quickly released. Just a little longer for everyone to escape from here. A voice spoke up, rousing Russell. Guardian, everyone is safe. He laughed loudly. You think doing this will have any effect? Large fires started to appear around them. Of course there are. His expression was dazed, as if he didn't understand what was happening. Russell's eyes suddenly changed. His eyes turned golden, and his pupils constricted. Because now I will destroy you. Both were standing inside the flames. He gritted his teeth and looked at Russell. What is this? He looked at him with bright golden eyes. The other one slashed hard and then recoiled. The air around him changed. He looked up, smiled sinisterly at Russell. Is he finally ready to strike? He was still inside the shield while the other was in an attack stance. He immediately rushed forward. Then I'll pierce both you and the shield. Suddenly, a golden stream of light appeared, startling him. Russell took a weapon in his hand. Origin Russell Raymond. He took a stance, pointing it straight at the other. Flaming long spear. His eyes blazed red. The tip of his blade flashed with light. Fire spear. Russell was also ready to attack. No, this thing is completely different. This spear. Both rushed at each other. The two weapons clashed, flashing brightly. It must be at least a few levels higher than the magic he cast before. Don Click was fighting the dwarves. Damn it! He was surrounded by the dwarves. The more I kill, the more of them there are. But I can't kill them all. Don Click panted tiredly. My stupid older brother? What the hell is he doing? Daria stood to one side, controlling them. If he were here, I would have caught up to that witch by now. The dwarves immediately rushed towards him. Don Click slashed at them. Just need to hold on a little longer. Beneath his feet, it suddenly cracked, and a faint light shone up. Don Click immediately looked down at his feet with a surprised expression. The cracked area suddenly bulged, making him unable to stand firm. A large pillar of fire shot straight up from under the ship to the sky. He was also hit by the previous blow. Cough. Don Click couldn't believe what had just happened and shouted loudly, Impossible! Daria stood to one side, dazed, covering her mouth. What is this? A sound made her turn her head to look behind. Inside the ship, the elves and slaves were coming up. I was too careless. The ship's deck had a large hole in it. He was lying unconscious below. Russell took care of everything. His face was relaxed. His clothes were slightly torn and had some blood on them. A notification appeared. Notification. You have completed the mission and received a reward. You have received a medium-level mana stone. Shouts from below rang out. The leader is down. Surround them. Defense ship. Concentrate. Daria looked up and raised her staff. Ho ho. Embers started to appear around the dwarves. I should think carefully about this. She slammed her staff hard onto the ship's deck. A barrage of fire bullets was launched, attacking the small ships around. The ship glided quickly over the sea. Hands were placed over the wound, and light immediately appeared. Russell propped himself up. What happened? Don't move, benefactor. Yahello placed her hand on the glowing spot. My mana hasn't recovered yet, so the healing will be a bit delayed. Daria, standing to one side, spoke up, startling him. Well done. You defeated 2 knights by yourself, huh? Russell didn't believe it and turned to speak but was cut off by her. I thought I only fought 1, but it was actually 2. They are currently tied to the post. I owe you. Yahello spoke to him. It's a big debt, even though I can't repay you immediately, but... She began to introduce herself. I, Yahello, daughter of the White Wax Tree tribe. I swear on the honor of my ancestors one day I will repay this kindness. He placed his hand on his chest and smiled. I am Russell Raymond. I only did my duty as a guardian. Daria interjected into the conversation. Miss Yahello, don't forget us, the people of the fire tower, too, ho ho. A loud voice rang out. Tower Master, we have finished checking the condition of the prisoners. Very good. She turned to Ilo and said, my subordinates are too competent. They behave completely differently than before. Russell turned to call her Miss Ilo when we were on the deck. What did you mean? Ilo looked at him and asked, are you asking about J? Her next word startled Daria, who looked over. When I mentioned the scent of spirits, the ship continued to speed across the sea. That's right. Ilo's hair flowed gently in the wind. Do you have mixed blood with the Dragon Clan? He thought for a moment. Dragon Clan? That's right. Actually, I carry the blood of the Azure Dragon. Of course, it's just like a drop of water in a lake. She lifted Russell's hand. But with just a little dragon blood, it's enough to attract spirits. Ilo lowered her head and continued, slightly surprising him. I can smell a very strong scent of spirits from you. That's why I wondered if you also have mixed dragon blood like me. Daria listened to the conversation and thought to herself, is mixed dragon blood the reason Russell can develop so quickly? She turned her back and looked towards the sunset. He could become someone. His face serious, he looked. Who throws the entire kingdom of Endymion into chaos? Ah no, the entire continent, that's more like it. The ship was anchored. Everyone on board slowly moved to the mainland. The group in tightly wrapped cloaks watched them disembark. A call rang out, making her turn to look. Miss Ilo. Daria smiled and said, I'm sure the young lady will stay hidden until she recovers all her mana, right? Ilo nodded. That's right. My mansion is not far from here. If you don't mind, young lady, you can stay there. I think you can help with Russell's training. He looked dazed and pointed at himself. Training? She also happily agreed. If I can repay the kindness in that way, I am very willing. She placed her hand on Russell's shoulder and looked at him. Well, you don't want to? He also smiled very happily and replied, Of course not. I really want to. Special training from the Fire Tower Master. Daria extended her hand to show the way. Then please everyone this way. Luggage will be brought here soon. Thank you, ma'am. Everyone started moving towards the tower while Russell asked, Tower Master, is it all right? The new semester is about to start. Don't worry. Leave that to Hubert Professor. Along the coastline, convoys of horse-drawn carriages moved in a line. The carriages followed one after another, looking quite rushed. At this moment, the leading carriage stopped first. A person's voice called out, We've arrived. Immediately after, the carriages behind also stopped in front of the mansion. He stepped down from the carriage following along and couldn't help but exclaim, It's so big. She raised her hand to push the door, not forgetting to turn back, smile, and say to him, Make yourself at home, don't be shy. Then she led him and the former prisoners into the mansion area. Ilo couldn't help but admire the surrounding scenery and exclaimed, It's truly a beautiful place. Thank you for your kindness, Tower Master. Suddenly, something caught his attention, making him turn around to look behind. He suddenly remembered something. Wait a minute. This place. He recalled the image of a happy family of 3 playing and thought, I definitely came here with my parents. Thinking so, he approached her and asked, Tower Master, I have something to ask. Hearing that, she turned her head and asked, What is it? He quickly replied, This mansion didn't used to be yours, did it? Hearing that, she said a bit belatedly, Listening to you, I thought you were accusing me of stealing it. He knew his question was phrased a bit wrongly and said embarrassedly, Haha, I'm sorry. But then her answer surprised him. You're right. Its previous owner was some merchant guild. I just bought it a few years ago. Hearing that, he became even more certain about the images appearing in his mind. Just as I thought, this place is one of my family's properties. After speaking, she asked him, Do you want to ask anything else? He smiled and replied, No. He looked towards the tall building and thought, After the family fell, I heard it was sold at a low price. He followed her into the grand hall, his mind constantly thinking, I never expected to return here one day. A week later, the door opened and a girl in a white dress walked in. She said, There you are, Ilo. She walked in happily and said, I heard you call me. She sized her up with sharp eyes and said, What a relief. It seems most of your mana has recovered. She stood there, very gracefully, smiled gently and said, It's all thanks to you, Tower Master. She put down her teacup and said, So about what we discussed before, can you help train Russell? Amananchi, hearing that she conjured a water spirit and said, When you say training, you probably mean the soul. She immediately replied, That's right. Then she stood opposite her and asked, But where is Russell? She smiled happily and replied, I told him to do something else. Scene changes to another place. At this moment on a cliff, a terrifying scream that shook heaven and earth rang out. He fell from a great height, Then he fell straight into the water, causing water to splash everywhere, stirring up the entire area. Immediately after he emerged from the water with a loud gasp, he slicked back his hair, looked up and said, did I fail again? He remembered standing on the cliff earlier. She had taught him. What did you learn from the fight with those pirate knights? I mean, what do you think you need? He recalled the fight at that time and hesitantly said, that matter. Then looking at the distance between the two mountainsides, he replied, distance. She stepped forward and said, right. In battle, distance is very important for a mage. Then she turned back to look at him and said, watch carefully. While casting fire magic and walking in midair, she said, think about shrinking space. Then her whole body moved quickly like a flame darting to the other side. Her entire body emanated fire magic and very quickly reached the top of the other slope. That is space-time teleportation magic flash. She turned back towards him and said, from now on you practice crossing this cliff using flash. Seeing he looked quite apprehensive, she continued, later on it will become a powerful tool for you. At this moment, the status bar displayed a notification. Mission Learn Space-Time Teleportation. Flash. Reward medium-level mana stone. Back in the present, he was panting heavily on the seashore. He tried his best to climb the cliff, his mind constantly thinking, flash. Whether the spell circle is large or small doesn't matter. He sat on top of the cliff looking down and thinking, I can only learn this magic if I understand its rules clearly. His clothes were now soaked through with water, but he was not discouraged. He continued to step forward into the air persistently, trying again. And it was no surprise when another blood-curdling scream that pierced the heavens echoed. He failed again. Then he tried to climb up again, panting and saying, is this learning magic or physical training? His body was covered in water. His face tired, he closed his eyes tightly and said, focus. Think about closing the distance. Then he continued to step out and try again. And this time, he really managed to create fire magic under his feet. Both his legs were covered in fire magic. He intended to move further forward. He shouted, now! But suddenly, she appeared calling, Russell, which made him lose focus and plummet downwards. His entire body was covered in fire magic. He looked up and said in surprise, Daria? She knew she had called him at the wrong time, causing him to fall, and felt a bit awkward saying nothing. At this moment, he realized he was falling and suddenly shouted loudly. It was already dark by now. Both of them were in a cave. She gently placed her hand on his face and said, from today, you will learn about soul contracts. All three were warming themselves by the crackling fire. She said, Elo will help you. Hearing that, she also gently placed her hand on her chest and said, I am glad I can help you, sir. He politely followed suit, placed his hand on his chest, bowed his head and replied, thank you, Miss Elo. Then both of them sat by the fire. She slowly taught him, sir, please, slowly close your eyes. She was very considerate, teaching him bit by bit. And imagine something related to fire. Not far away, Daria was silently observing the two of them. While looking at him, she said, morning, sunlight, midday sun, or a campfire, anything will do. He also very seriously followed her instructions, focusing only on fire in his mind. Very quickly, his entire body was covered in flames burning all over him. Seeing him like that, she couldn't help but be amazed. Amazing for a human body to have such pure mana. Then she also slowly closed her eyes and said, I will enter your subconscious and guide you. With that, she placed both hands on his shoulders and entered his subconscious. In his subconscious, she took his hand and guided him. A place where the full moon shone brightly. Most people don't know that anyone can enter the soul gate, whether human or elf or any other existence. A place of natural green forest covered in mist. We are all born in nature. Or a place of war and massacre devoid of life. The purpose of all is to reach there where they will intersect and the gates will open. A large flame erupted. Daria, watching from outside, was somewhat astonished. She wasn't much better off at this moment. What is this flow in his heart? The image that appeared was of a person with a sword piercing through another's body, accompanied by a blood-curdling scream. She recognized it. Is this hatred? Seeing that scene, she unconsciously couldn't bear it and clutched her head in pain. Ugh! She struggled to look up ahead, her eyes full of exhaustion. At this moment, she was still holding his hand. Far in the distance was a door with an incredibly dazzling light emanating from it. What is this flow in his heart? She turned to look at him, biting his lip, tears streaming down, and immediately recognized it as hatred. Outside, she still had her hands on his shoulders. Discomfort was evident on his face. No, perhaps that is… Suddenly, an incredibly dazzling light emanated from where they were covering a large space in the cave. Daria, seeing this, was extremely astonished, her eyes wide. Immediately after, that light shone even more intensely. It seemed to prevent anyone from approaching. She quickly tried to run over. That light shone dazzlingly throughout the cave, making others unable to help but be blinded. When he woke up, he was lying in a room and slowly opened his eyes, immediately seeing Daria beside him. His face was still dazed when she spoke. "Are you awake?" He tried to sit up, looked at her and said, "Tower Master." He put his hand to his head, wincing in pain, and then asked her, "What happened, E?" He sat on the bed clutching his head and said, "I feel like my mana went berserk." At this moment, the door opened and Ilo walked in. Seeing her, he said, "Miss Ilo." Then his attention fell on her bandaged injured arm and he asked, "Your arm?" Seeing that, she just gently replied, "Benefactor, I'm fine." At this moment, as if thinking of something, he blamed himself and asked, "Is it my fault?" He covered his face, lowered his head, and said, "I'm truly very, very sorry." It was dark. He stood alone in the mansion's courtyard, looking up at the sky, seemingly with a lot on his mind. Daria, standing high above, could see his figure standing alone there. She called out, "Miss Elo." She turned back to look at her and said, "What exactly happened?" She immediately recalled and told her, "It was terrible. The source of his consciousness was very chaotic when we set foot on the path leading to the Soul Gate. We couldn't proceed because suddenly there was a very intense flow of emotions." Hearing that, she put her hand to her chin and thought, "A flow of emotions." She immediately replied, "That's right, it looked like a flow of hateful emotions." She slightly lowered her head, her eyes a bit sad, and said, "But it also resembled sad emotions more." She thought of him with pity and said, "That sadness was so great, I wonder how he could hide it for so long." The next morning, a call, Russell, rang out. He turned and replied, "Yes, Tower Master." She arrived with Elo, walking and talking. "Today we will start new training." He bowed his head in obedience and said, "If you say so." Before he could finish, she cut him off and ordered, "Clean up." Hearing that, he looked up with some confusion and said, "Yes?" as if to confirm. She smiled, raised her hand and said, "You will help the servants in the mansion for a week to clean every nook and cranny thoroughly." Hearing that, he was a bit surprised. "Clean the mansion," she continued. "During that time, Miss Ilo and I will go to the capital for a trip." She immediately bowed politely and said, "See you next week, sir." Seeing that, he also shyly greeted back, "Ah, yes, please take care, both of you." She then added, "This is not a punishment," which made him a bit confused. He immediately agreed, "All right." He thought he would clean and practice refraction techniques in the remaining time. As if knowing his intention, she continued, "Just letting you know, but this week I forbid you from using magic." Hearing that, he was surprised, his eyes wide, and he let out a, "Huh?" Finally, after the two left, he picked up a broom, looked at the mansion hallway, and decided to go clean. He very enthusiastically held the broom and mop, saying, "Well then?" The next second, he was very excited, holding the broom, mopping and shouting, "I'll do physical training while cleaning, I just can't use magic, that's all." Suddenly his foot slipped and he couldn't react in time. Next, his body leaned backward and the broom slipped from his hand. Immediately after, he fell to the floor. Beside him was a shattered vase. A maid from the mansion standing behind him spoke up. "Who mops the floor at that speed?" Hearing that, he immediately turned to see who it was. The maid continued, "That vase was very precious to Madame Daria." He remembered before Daria left, she had instructed him, "Ah, Russell, about the cleaning. You just need to listen to the head maid." At this moment, a head maid along with other servants were also there, listening to her orders. The head maid was a rather mature middle-aged woman. She wore glasses and had a very stern face. Back to the present, he had broken Daria's vase and the head maid was scolding him. Only then did he realize and hurriedly said, "I'm sorry." She quickly put on her gloves and said, "I know you're not allowed to use magic for a week." Then she handed him a handkerchief and said, "So from now on, clean according to my instructions." After that, he went to clean, always with the head maid following and supervising him. When he was cleaning, she reminded him, "You have to support the bottom of the vase with your hand." Then when he was sweeping, she also stood to one side, pointing, "Don't you think behind that door also needs to be mopped?" He hurriedly apologized. His face showed a bit of fear. She continued, "But it seems you can't see the dirt on the floor." And so countless times he was taught by the head maid how to clean over and over again. Finally, The work was done. He tiredly found a spot plopped down on the floor, panting, his whole body devoid of strength. He sat there terrified by what had just happened, his eyes full of fatigue, his face covered in sweat, saying this. He thought back to the image of the headmaid spinning in his mind, constantly saying, "You're crazy, Russell." The carpet, the window. He couldn't help but shiver in fear, his face covered in sweat, and said, "Is this some kind of mental training?" At this moment, a familiar voice rang out. "Russell, it's time for lunch." She looked towards him and said, "Follow me." Hearing that, he felt a bit embarrassed and awkward, saying, "Haha, I'll eat later." Hearing him say that, her face instantly became fearsome. She turned back, looked at him, and ordered, "Follow me." He finally compromised, followed her, looked at her apprehensively, and replied, "All right." At this moment, in the kitchen, everyone was very lively, talking boisterously with each other. He found a spot for himself and settled down there. Only then did he notice, there are really a lot of people working here. Someone spoke up and asked, "What's your name?" He turned to reply to the greeting of the old man beside him, "I'm Russell Raymond." Hearing that, the old man was a bit surprised and stiffened, asking him again to confirm, "Raymond." Seeing the old man's reaction, he also felt a bit suspicious and thought, "Does he know me?" But the old man's next word surprised him. "You're quite handsome, huh? Black hair and red eyes too." A maid sitting opposite, hearing that, also clapped her hands in agreement and said, "That's right, you look so cool." A rather imposing dark-skinned young man clapped him on both shoulders, from behind laughed, and said, "You look pretty fit too. Let me feel your muscles, okay?" The sudden action made him turn around in surprise and say, "Yes." Immediately after, the young man slapped him hard on the back, laughed, and said, "I'm kidding." The atmosphere in the dining room became even livelier. Everyone laughed very happily. Outwardly, he still tried to force a happy laugh. Haha. But inwardly, he was crying. He tried to reassure himself, just endure it for a week. This must be training. It's definitely training. At this moment, the protagonist and everyone else were carrying freshly cut tree trunks. As he walked, he thought, if I could use my mage body, I could finish this instantly. Over here, everyone settled back into their seats. "Here, take this. Everyone did a great job." Immediately after, their group raised their glasses with a cheer. Just as the protagonist took a sip of wine, the person next to him suddenly looked at him. A sudden slap landed squarely on the protagonist's back, causing him to spit out the water in his mouth. The protagonist, dazed and confused, turned, wiped his mouth, and asked, "Why did you hit me?" The other person, seeing this, unpleasantly reminded him, "You're still a student. Drinking alcohol will make you sick, you know." At this moment, he had to put down his wine glass, dazed. "Oh dear, I forgot I'm still a student. I thought I was still a mercenary." The others, seeing this, laughed. "It's okay, it's okay." Then he poured more into his cup. "You also have to slowly learn to drink." He looked at the peaceful scene in front of him, contemplated, and said, "Besides sitting in front of such a beautiful scene, not drinking is a great sin." At this moment, their whole group looked towards the sun far in the distance, peeking from behind the mountains. Suddenly, a voice rang out, "There's one more sin." Their group was startled and turned their heads. The newcomer was the maid. Her voice was serious as she said, "It's drinking beer without snacks." In her hand at this moment was a basket of things. The people around, seeing this, were joyful. "All right, cheers to the new member." Before this joyful scene, she looked towards the protagonist. Her eyes seemed to be full of unspoken thoughts. At this moment, the protagonist with them laughed as if completely relaxed, being himself. Then the scene changed. The protagonist was now cleaning the yard. Then he went to eat and drink with his comrades. Finally, time shifted to night. He lay on the ground, relaxing and gazing at the night sky. Day after day, he peacefully gardened with the maid. Then he happily chatted with everyone while eating a piece of bread. Time passed like that. At this moment, there was a crescent moon in the sky. The protagonist looked up while sitting and pondering, tomorrow will be a full week. What is this unsatisfied feeling? Suddenly, someone approached. "It seems you really like this place." As soon as he saw her, he stood up and said, "Hello." She adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable, and spoke. "How many times a day do you plan to call me, sir?" Hearing that, he laughed awkwardly. "Haha, do I do that a lot? I didn't realize." Then she approached him again and asked, "What's the reason you came out here?" The protagonist let out an "ah." He looked up at the sky with a bit of nostalgia. "I remember someone when I stand here." Hearing that, she seemed puzzled. "I heard mages can teleport instantly. Can't you go see them?" The protagonist immediately replied, "But teleportation magic is very difficult. And even if I could, they are now in a place I can no longer reach. Hearing that, she asked casually, I thought mages didn't worry about anything. He calmly replied, not at all. As if to hide her emotions, she turned away, crossed her arms, and spoke. Tomorrow is your last day of cleaning. Do a good job. The protagonist politely replied with a yes. At this moment, she seemed to be thinking about something, then turned and said to him, I don't know much about magic, but I think you're a good person, protagonist. Hearing that, he was stunned, his eyes wide as he looked at her. The other person, seemingly unaccustomed to praising others, quickly added, even if you don't become a great mage, you can still be a good servant under me. Hearing that, the protagonist gave a dry laugh. All right, I'll remember that. Then time shifted to the next day. At this moment, in another place, amidst a large, opulent golden gate, an elegant carriage appeared. Are you back, Tower Master? At this moment, Tower Master Daria was wearing a white outfit with a touch of red. She immediately inquired, Are you not feeling well? Elo also spoke up. How are you, protagonist? He quickly replied, I'm very well. She looked at him and smiled. Come with me for a bit. Then they went inside the tower. You've worked hard this time. He didn't feel that way at all and replied, Not at all. Tower Master Daria walked ahead, leaving him her back. Finding medicine to restore Elo's mana took quite some time. Elf mana is very special. Then she planted her staff into the ground and stopped. And I have to check something in the storage vault. Hearing that, the protagonist exclaimed, You're really busy, aren't you? At this point, the Tower Master suddenly turned and said to him, This place once belonged to the Raymond family. The protagonist immediately fell silent, his expression somewhat sad. She continued, Elo said there's a very strong torrent in your heart, and that's why you can't touch your soul. Her voice hesitated as she inquired, That torrent? Do you feel you've been offended by it? At this moment, his hand clenched tightly, trembling. However, she didn't stop and continued to ask, Or is it anger? If not, is it just sadness? His eyes now showed both confusion and anger. All of it. It reminds me of the first time I met you. Back then, he was still in the library researching magic materials. You fought alone. At that time, his eyes were full of determination, but also loneliness. Back then, he was alone in the empty library studying magic. Thinking back now, you were just a lonely head of the family trying to rebuild your clan. Reaching this point, she didn't beat around the bush and continued, Then take this place. Hearing that, the protagonist was startled and stepped back. What do you mean? She showed no particular expression and continued, I'm not giving it to you for free. Become a battle mage of the Fire Tower and the strongest warrior protecting this country. Her powerful words stunned him. Next, the Tower Master didn't stop and continued, Earn a lot of money and buy this place back from me. He just listened to her, dazed. Then the Tower Master smirked. Do you understand, young man? Hearing the three words, young man, the protagonist was stunned. She smiled confidently and kindly. Don't struggle alone. Then night fell. The three of them gathered around a crackling bonfire. Last time, when I approached the soul gate, I didn't awaken your subconscious. I only guided you with my mana. This time, let's go to the gate together. He said with some worry, What if I get injured again, Elo? She gave a thumbs up and smiled. I brought a lot of medicine, don't worry. He still hesitated. No, that's not what I mean. Hearing that, she ignored it and continued, Then close your eyes. Think of fire like last time. I will awaken you in your mind. Hearing that, he also gradually closed his eyes and felt the flame. In his subconscious, as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Ilo. She asked, Can you see me? The protagonist looked at his hand and felt it. So, this is my pure mana. Ilo walked ahead and reminded him, Just like last time when you came here, everything is still smooth. The two of them continued to walk forward. Her steps faltered slightly as she continued, but they stopped in front of a cliff. This torrent is still here. Below the cliff was a torrent ceaselessly surging and frothing. Far beyond the torrent was a constantly glowing gate. It's very difficult to approach the source located at the soul gate. The protagonist didn't hesitate and walked forward. This torrent, Ilo quickly grabbed his hand. If you get closer, then as soon as he stepped forward, he was immediately knocked back. He fell hard to the ground. She lamented, Just looking at it is dangerous enough. At this moment, thoughts constantly echoed in his mind. Graduate from the academy, get chosen for the tower, restore the family, avenge father. He stared wide-eyed, stunned. He couldn't help but cover his face sitting on the ground. I'm sorry I can't make this thing disappear. Ilo patted his shoulder, not knowing what to say. Suddenly, a voice rang out. How is it protagonist? Hearing that, he looked up. Daria. At this moment outside, the maid appeared and said, "He is a good person." The two women stood side by side, confiding. The tower master spoke, "You won't leave him alone, will you?" The maid replied, "That's right." Inside, the protagonist was silently stunned. He remembered his conversation with Professor Hubert. He placed his hand on his shoulder and said, "Come with me for a bit." He also remembered the happy times with the people in this place. All right, cheers to the new member. Then there was his conversation with the maid on the 6th day. "I don't remember much about magic, but I think you're a good person." Finally, Daria's smiling, trusting face said, "Don't struggle alone." At this point, it was as if he had an epiphany. That's right. At this moment, hot tears streamed down the protagonist's face as he looked up with determination. "I can jump over there," he told himself. "Think about shrinking space-time." The protagonist walked forward. Elo behind him couldn't help but worry. "Don't get any closer," he told himself. "I'll be fine." The protagonist bit his lip and rushed forward. "Even if I fall?" His leg now reached out to the cliff. "I'm not alone." Elo, seeing this, was immediately stunned. Immediately after, she saw his figure disappear like an arrow shot through the torrent. Flash. At this moment, the two words "flash" kept repeating in Elo's mind. She stared blankly at the scene before her. Just as he reached the other side of the gate, a voice rang out. "Benefactor?" At this moment, his figure seemed to be constantly burning, standing in front of the glowing gate. "You did it, sir." Immediately after, the system announced, "You have completed the mission. You have received a reward, a medium-level monostone." The protagonist looked at the glowing gate before him and pondered, "I've crossed it. What should I do now?" The torrent behind him continued to surge. At this very moment, the voice continued, "Enter the gate of light before you, sir." The voice startled him. This voice unexpectedly belonged to Ilo. She smiled and said, "You didn't expect it?" "Did you, sir? We can still communicate with each other thanks to the mana link." Over here, the system continued to announce, "Mission contract with a spirit. Summon a spirit according to Elo's instructions, and form a contract with the spirit. Reward medium-level monostone." Then she told him to put his hand into the gate. He immediately reached out and touched that light. He still hesitated and asked, "What will happen?" Elo continued to answer, "Now it depends on the spirit's decision." Hearing that, he also closed his eyes and reached out to feel. It seemed that around him, eyes of different shapes continuously appeared. No one knew which spirit would come. Her words continued to echo in the darkness. "Perhaps you won't be chosen, sir." Elo clasped her hands sincerely. "So just reach out and wait." Outside the tower, Master also silently observed him. "That's all I can do." Inside, at this moment, he closed his eyes, so everything was dark. "If it's too difficult, it's okay if no spirit comes. I won't be sad because of that." His hand, without any tension, comfortably reached out. Immediately after, a monster suddenly appeared right behind him. Below was a powerful magic circle. The protagonist's thoughts didn't stop. "I am grateful for the moment that brought me here." That beast then approached his hand. Immediately after, the protagonist's eyes gradually opened. He was immediately stunned and looked down. Below was a small beast resembling a dragon, its red eyes exactly like his. The small beast rolled its eyes and looked at him innocently. The protagonist wondered, "Is this a spirit?" On the other side, Elo couldn't help but be moved to tears. "Benefactor, congratulations." The Tower Master also laughed. "I don't just have one thing to congratulate you on." Hearing this, he was startled and looked down. The protagonist realized he had obtained the 4th spell circle. His face immediately couldn't hide his joy. Remembering how determined the protagonist was back then to step forward and overcome the barrier of the torrent in his subconscious, the Tower Master couldn't help but exclaim, "You've overcome your own mental barrier." Then he sat back and looked at the data on the system. Speaking of that notification again, "You have acquired new knowledge about summoning spirits and thereby obtained the 4th spell circle. You will receive an additional reward." It seems the reward is very mysterious, only showing question marks. At this moment, the small spirit beast suddenly flew up towards him. It actually lay directly on his head. At this moment, the person and the spirit looked at each other. Elo reached out and stroked its chin affectionately. "I don't think this is an ordinary spirit." Then she picked it up and asked, "Are you going to name it, sir?" She placed the small beast in his hand and said, "Name it, and I will complete the contract." The Tower Master also agreed with this. "Give it a really good name." He looked at it and pondered, "Red, huh, then?" However, the next name he said stunned all three of them. "Smoked ham. Okay?" The tower master was so angry she wanted to bite her tongue. The maid had to turn away, covering her mouth. Seeing their reaction, he quickly forced a laugh. Haha, I was just kidding. The small spirit in his hand also sighed in relief. He then continued, how about Pepper? The cute little spirit, hearing its name was finally normal, smiled happily and seemed to agree. The three on the other side, seeing that, sighed in relief. It sounds cute too. The tower master didn't feel it was bad. The protagonists, seeing their expressions, forced a laugh. Pepper is just short for pepperoni. Then the tower master smiled and said, then to celebrate tomorrow, we will officially start special training. Elo also sincerely spoke up, I will teach you about spirits, sir. He immediately hugged Pepper and replied, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. Over here, Pepper seemed satisfied, licking its paw. Nice to meet you, Pepper. From that day, things gradually passed until a month later. Everyone in the tower gathered in front of the gate. It's finally time for the towers to choose students. They stood outside, constantly speculating, I wonder how many graduating students will be chosen this year. The bald-headed teacher also spoke up, laughing, it's basically already written down. At this moment, a horse suddenly appeared. A majestic shout rang out, the White Tower's representative has arrived. From inside the carriage, two people with orange and white hair emerged. Each tower will select individuals for training throughout this term. Next, the Golden Tower's adjudicator arrived. If they can't choose, who else can? Then the adjudicator of the Merchant Tower arrived. They continued to discuss. He's right. So the two men chatted happily. We need to help these students more. Okay. Professor Hubert, seeing the other two, fell silent. For our benefit, I mean for this school. The other person also chimed in. Haha, that's right. It's for this school. He crossed his arms, annoyed, and clicked his tongue. Who would dare call themselves a student when they only like a few talented ones? Finally, the Fire Tower's adjudicator arrived. A hand reached out from the carriage door, and immediately, the group on the other side turned pale with fear. A majestic man with long red hair appeared. A terrified shout rang out. Vermilion Usen. Professor Hubert, seeing this, was also surprised. Why is he here? The Fire Tower adjudicator's expression was not very friendly as he frowned. He laughed and said, probably hasn't arrived yet. The professor on the other side worried, sending him as an adjudicator. Does that mean she doesn't want to choose the protagonist? Then at this moment, sparks continuously flashed in the sky above. The professor below was still worried. The protagonist is nowhere to be seen. Up above, he was already rushing over. The Fire Tower adjudicator was immediately startled and looked up. He immediately took a defensive stance, sensing something. The young man over here sighed in relief and wiped away a bead of sweat. He stood at the building opposite the gate and sighed. Almost late. The protagonist was startled again and looked down. He immediately faced Vermilion Usen. He had also seen him. The opponent immediately acted uninterested and turned to go inside. However, in front, his face transformed with excitement. This will be very interesting. Fighting him will surely be exhilarating. Russell stood greeting everyone at the gate. Thank you all very much. Russell looked at Elo before him, smiled happily and said, I hope you return to your homeland safely. Elo bowed her head gently and replied, Thank you, Sir Benefactor. He turned his head to look at the person beside him. Madam, head maid. His words startled her for a moment. I will definitely return. Russell teased, Until then, I will be the master of this place, so please manage it well. While adjusting her glasses, she chuckled. We know. I hope so too. Russell looked up and said to everyone, Although it was a short time, thank you all very much. Daria crossed her arms and asked him, Kid, you don't need a carriage? Russell, while massaging his shoulder, nodded. Yes, I don't want to be late, so running is much faster. She put one hand in her pocket and suddenly suggested, Then on your way back, kid, I have a request for you, young man. She presented a neatly sealed letter with a red seal on the back. Kid, can you deliver this letter to Hubert? Yeah. Russell quickly replied, Yes, I will definitely deliver it. Before he could finish, she cut him off. Okay, thanks, kid. This action of hers made him feel a bit confused again. Not long after Russell was in Professor Hubert's room, the two sat opposite each other on the sofa. Hubert held the letter in his hand and began, It's fortunate you returned in time. He read the letter with some confusion. However, this selection, it will be quite difficult to help you. Professor Hubert placed the letter on the table with a thud. Because a few things have just come up that I must quickly complete. Russell smiled. It's all right, Professor. He clenched his fist, his tone becoming serious. All I can tell you is, Hubert remembered the tall, muscular man with long hair and gave a reminder, don't underestimate Brother Usin. He slowly stood up. This selection, then he approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. You need to be the strongest, not just try your best. If it's you, you can do it. He glanced at him reassuringly. All right, don't worry, teacher. The system now displayed Notification Tower Selection Mission. Show an overwhelming difference in rank and gain recognition from the Selection Appraisal Council. Recognitions from the Selection Appraisal Council are now 0/10. Reward, medium-level mana stone. A few days later in the council room, each person had a desk and a chair. A professor sitting at the front spoke, first round of selection, the written exam begins. Russell wrote attentively while thinking, the written exam isn't too difficult because I failed this exam many times in my previous life. His eyes drooped. Russell paused for a few seconds. If there's anything to worry about, he remembered the letter Daria asked him to deliver to Hubert, a teacher's letter. Russell recalled the number of business trips Professor Hubert took after receiving that letter. After this, Professor Hubert's trips will be more frequent, almost to the point where he can no longer teach his classes in the academy. Russell suddenly remembered the day someone passed away. Everyone stood heartbroken before a tombstone full of white flowers. And not long after that, the year he was granted leave, Professor Hubert. He finished the exam and walked out of the council room. Just as he reached the door, he stood there stunned. I don't know exactly what happened. Russell looked up at the green tree in front of him, pondering. That could be a truly dangerous mission, for it turned out that on that tree branch, a snake was tightly coiled around a young bird preparing to eat it alive. In his heart, perhaps his mood was similar to that little bird's. A high-level mage in the fire tower. Not long after he stood on the podium to receive his award, highest score in the written exam, Russell Raymond. The people below were extremely surprised. Russell got the highest score. Kidding, he's really smart. So jealous. Wow. He looked seriously at the person in front. Can I stop it? The professor's death. Outside the academy, an announcement echoed, second round of selection, the interview test will begin shortly. People sat in waiting chairs to be interviewed. A secretary announced, please enter when your name is called. His name was then called Russell Raymond. He immediately stood up straight, determined in his heart, I need to stop it. I can stop it. Russell walked proudly on the green carpet to the interview location. Because the evidence for that is right in front of me. Suddenly he paused. In my previous life, I don't remember Mr. Usin becoming a judge for the selection. Russell clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Usin. I've changed the future, so I need to join the fire tower and prevent the professor's death. Usin crossed his arms and stared at the young man before him while he was still lost in his thoughts. I need to be recognized here. The people beside him reminded him. When the examiner asks, you have to answer concisely and verbally. Okay? Understand? Russell looked at that person and replied with a yes. The white-haired professor picked up a paper and spoke, we will begin. 300 years ago, the formula was created by the mage Origin, and so questions were continuously posed to him. Russell answered proficiently without any worry, we need to apply the concept of recycled materials to change the formula. Finishing his words, he thought smugly, the interview questions are even easier than the written exam questions. The white-haired professor continued to ask more questions while he was still thinking. However, there's another task in the second round of the exam. Suddenly, an incredibly strong, dazzling light shone in front of him. Russell still stood firm. That is to withstand the mana emanating from the selection judges. Russell recalled the scene of himself coughing violently and bending over before this amount of mana in his previous life. In my previous life, I always failed from this round, but now the mana flew straight at his face, making his hair disheveled. He was confident. This time, it's different. Suddenly, Russell spoke. If you change the ratio of ingredients in the potion, you can even get triple the effect. The person sitting next to Usin laughed and said, that kid is pretty amazing. His expression doesn't even change despite being in a mana storm. Usin gritted his teeth and gave a mysterious smile. Just that much, huh? As soon as he finished speaking, a purple stream of energy flew out from Usin's area. Russell felt this power was incredibly terrifying. He widened his eyes and gritted his teeth to endure. The others looking at the energy Usin emitted also felt extremely confused. The person beside him looked at Usin, who was laughing gleefully, frowned and silently cursed. He's truly a mad tiger. If this continues, this energy was so strong it made that person close their eyes tightly. The contestant might die. But when he opened his eyes, he still saw Russell unmoved, even smirking, which surprised him. He can withstand it. Another person with a bead of sweat looked at him and silently exclaimed, "Surprising." The others couldn't withstand this energy. Some covered their faces, some covered their mouths, some clutched their necks. Even the newly appointed professors in charge of documents were suffering. A blonde-haired professor smiled sinisterly. He is definitely an enviable genius. The system displayed notifications one by one. Recognition from selection judges, 1 now 110, 210. True 10, 410, 510, 610, 710, 810, 910. In front of Russell, Usain brushed his coat, frowned, and looked at him. "You're still enduring it." A second later, he slammed the table hard and roared, causing those purple energy streams to become even stronger. Then let's see. Before this energy, Russell's facial muscles started to bulge, but he still pursed his lips, his eyes determined to pass this round. Usain was not very pleased to see this scene. He glared down at Russell. Less than a second later, the blonde-haired professor placed his hand on his shoulder from behind, advising, "We still have many other interviews, so let's stop here." Usain said nothing and just chuckled a few times. His next words made Russell clench his fists behind his back. Something fun is about to happen. Boring as hell. At this moment, the new professors coughed, dryly, silently rejoicing. I survived." The silver-haired professor put the paper down on the table and praised him. "You did very well. You may leave, contestant. Next person come in." After a while, the room door was slammed shut. Russell panted heavily and plopped down on a waiting chair outside. Only then did he relax, his face drenched in sweat. "I thought I was about to die." Suddenly, his gaze changed slightly. Russell looked at the information on the system board. Recognition from selection judges 910. He tilted his head, forced a smile, and sighed. So saying it like this still isn't enough. He's not easy either. In a dark room where a little light pierced through a window slit, his name was called again, Russell Raymond. The professors, while leaving, were discussing, "So that's the contestant the fire tower master had her eye on. He's a student everyone wants to recruit. What a pity." The white-haired professor behind them laughed and said, "Usain, the youngest priest. Are you really conducting military training?" Usain turned his face, revealing scars, and growled, "What? Who said youngest?" The white-haired professor, terrified by this aura, quickly waved his hand. "No, I didn't mean that." Usain didn't bother to say anything and turned to leave, leaving the others both worried and speechless. Right before, in a treacherous mountainous forest, a very fierce battle was taking place. People were chasing a young man together. Shouts echoed, "Stop the newcomer here." Those people quickly discovered a flaw in the golden barrier. No, there's a crack in the barrier. At this time, Usain was just a naive teenager ruthlessly trampled upon by others. Then he swung his sword straight down in front of Usain. After that, no one knew what happened. People only heard blood-curdling screams in the dark night. Under the full moon in the silent night, Usain was now a grown teenager. After the battle, he looked down at the corpses on the ground with contempt. Weaklings. Usain's whole body was covered in wounds. Tears streamed down ceaselessly. He bit his lip tightly, thinking, if they collapse? Back in the present, he frowned with worry. Then everyone will also perish. Outside the academy, a very loud, clear shout, "It's time to start the third round of the exam." A professor stood on the podium and spoke to the students. "This test is a treasure hunt." That person held a blue gem and stated the requirement. In the dense forest of the hill, contestants must find blue mana. The students looked up and listened attentively. Based on the number of mana stones the contestants find and bring back, the contestant's score will be determined. Russell listened to the situation around him and thought, it seems they want the contestants to steal mana stones from each other. The professor quickly gathered everyone. "All right, contestants, line up." Russell silently looked at the system board as if thinking about something. He thought of Usain sitting and drinking tea. If I pass this third trial, Russell sighed and wondered, will Usain recognize me then? A begin sound rang out, and at the same time the contestants ran together towards the forest. Russell ran while calculating. First then, he ran as fast as he could. I have to do everything I can. After a while, Russell was surrounded by lush green trees. He slowly walked under the twilight, murmuring, "Should I summon it now?" Russell cupped his hands together, creating a crimson stream of spiritual energy. It'll probably be startled for a moment, and then it'll be over. Russell gently held a red beast in his hands and apologized. "It's been too long, Pepper. I'm sorry." I'm sorry because I can't use magic at school. Pepper not only blamed its master, but also laughed happily for a few moments, as if the long separation had made it miss him very much too. Russell looked at the small beast while taking something out of his space bag. Pepper, can you help me with something? He took out a small red stone and held it up. I want to find stones that look like this. Russell brought it close to Pepper's face for it to sniff. After a while, little Pepper flew off. He watched it silently, hoping, I heard that spirits in the mana world can sense magical abilities very keenly. After a moment, Pepper turned its head back and chirped, as if signaling him. Russell burst out laughing. You sniffed it out, huh? Russell slowly strode towards it. And so Pepper went ahead sniffing the scent and guiding him. Russell, following behind, cleared his throat. Then let's go. Far in the distance was an ancient tree with magic circles and strange red symbols meticulously carved on it. In a dusty wooden house, a person's voice rang out, "Finally found you." A person in a black cloak grabbed the collar of the middle-aged man opposite him and interrogated, "Where is the mage you dealt with now?" The middle-aged man was so scared he broke out in a cold sweat and hesitantly replied, I don't know. I only sold him a few ingredients needed for alchemy, that's all. That's all I know." The cloaked figure growled, "And what about the formula for that alchemy?" That person was completely covered, only revealing a pair of purple eyes and white hair. He frowned and questioned, "Don't you know that was a ritual of a heretical sect?" The innocent man remembered the skulls and bones with eerie blue energy bewildered. Instantly, the person in the black cloak pulled him up high, pressing him against the wall. "That person threatened helping those cultists is opposing the kingdom, you know." These words made him just stare wide-eyed. The mysterious person threatened again. "I'll ask again, where did that mage go?" The other man still insisted, shouting, I really don't know." Then he hesitantly recounted, "I only heard he would secretly follow a woman. That person also brought her disciple along." The middle-aged man remembered Russell's face. He slowly continued, "And he will go confirm the identity of that disciple." He slowly continued, "And he will go confirm the identity of that disciple. If the cultists want to confront her, it won't just be her." It was none other than Professor Hubert. His entire body now emanated a blazing red aura. He was extremely worried. And Russell will also be in danger. Not good. He hurriedly went outside, a blazing red aura trailing behind him. He couldn't help but feel uneasy. All the participants in the test are in danger. Outside it was dark now. A contestant walked while kicking a small stone, looking bored. "Damn it! What the heck is a mana stone? I can't use light magic because that would reveal my position." Suddenly, something moved behind the dense green grass over there. A dark shadow slowly rose, making him anxious. What is that?" From that dark shadow, an incredibly strong aura emanated. "Wind arrow." He took a defensive stance, looking around unsteadily. "You scared me a little. Could that be another contestant?" He quickly turned and left, not forgetting to glance back. Is he dead yet? Anyway, this is a competition. Suddenly he paused. Wait a minute. He schemed in his head, that guy? What if he possesses a mana stone? But when he turned back, there was no one there anymore. He anxiously exclaimed, where did he disappear to? Little did he know that behind him was a skull shape with blue energy emanating from its empty eye sockets, looking truly terrifying. He seemed to sense it and quickly glanced behind him. Just a second later, there were blood-curdling screams in the night. Russell was still searching for mana stones alone in the forest. His hand brushed past a leaf. This place. Looking at the scene before him, he wondered, is this the center of the forest? Pepper bent down towards a bag full of blue stones as if wanting to show him. Russell, seeing that, joyfully exclaimed, here it is. Pepper mischievously flew a circle towards him, but Russell felt something strange. But why are all the mana stones in one place? He patted little Pepper's head. You did a great job, Pepper. Then he thought to himself, so that's done. He bent down and saw a purple crystal. But this is a golem core. He held the purple crystal in his hand and saw it was cracked. It's destroyed. Russell speculated to himself, it seems like before the golem could be summoned, it was destroyed. Who was it? Suddenly, Pepper reacted very violently, making him turn to look behind. Sharp spikes immediately shot up from the ground, quickly rushing towards Russell. He was terrified by this scene, now only able to stare wide-eyed with no other movement. Russell and Pepper quickly flew to the side to dodge that blow. His entire body was enveloped in a red spiritual aura. He knelt on one knee. From Earth-type magic, Russell looked up at the sky. There were bright, clear dots shining beams of light down. He was surprised. Into light-type magic, those dots immediately attacked him, but Russell's agility allowed him to easily dodge. A terrifying explosion occurred in front of him. Russell thought, the opponent is not just one person. Suddenly, from behind him, emerald green arrows shot forward. Luckily, Pepper saw them and blew out a burst of flame towards the arrows. Russell laughed loudly and praised, "Well done, Pepper." It also gave a smug smile after the previous encounter. Russell summoned fire arrows on his wrist. He shot the fire arrows straight through those bright white dots. As soon as they collided, they exploded, shaking heaven and earth. Dust and smoke swirled dimly around Russell. He raised his hand and brushed it off a few times, staring intently ahead. Russell looked at the three people on either side and asked, "Who are you?" Russell looked at the person advancing towards him and continued, "Honorable students chosen by the tower." The remaining orange-haired person clutched their chest, looking at him angrily. Russell proudly questioned as he saw the third person clearly, "Yet you use such cowardly and dirty tricks." One person swung their hand and shouted, "Shut up! Why did a low-class bastard like you get to discover the first mana stone?" That guy bit his lip, thinking, surely only our group knew the location of the mana stone. This is too illogical. Then he glanced over and saw little Pepper rushing towards him. He was surprised. "A spirit?" The green-haired person suddenly realized, "It's a spirit." I understand why he found the mana stone so quickly now. The orange-haired person stared intently at him. "Russell Raymond? I didn't expect someone to hide such high-level skills themselves." Russell, one hand on his hip, the other rubbing his head, forced a smile. "Finding it quickly isn't anything special." His next words made the blue-haired guy stunned. "Saying it as if I definitely wouldn't find it isn't as good." He remembered when their group was happily laughing and talking with the professors and immediately exposed them. "I almost forgot there must be some secret deal between you and the professors, right?" The blue-haired guy gritted his teeth, worried. "Tsk, this guy is too sharp." But he turned his face away again and suggested, "Anyway, I don't intend to interfere. Just don't get in my way." The blue-haired guy quickly summoned his pinkish-purple energy, growling, "Don't deceive yourself." Somehow Russell had flown behind him and whispered, "Try it if you're good enough. You'll regret it." The green-haired guy, seeing this, was also astonished. The orange-haired guy's jaw dropped. Flash! Suddenly, little Pepper flew to him, growling a few times, surprising him. "Pepper." He looked up ahead, his expression extremely serious. Russell suddenly realized, there's movement from the forest. He placed his hand on the blue-haired guy's shoulder and called, "Hey!" That guy asked in alarm, "What?" Turning to face the cracked purple crystal on the floor, he inquired, "Those professors who assisted you, did they mention anything about destroying the Dark Golem?" "Etira." The blue-haired guy, sweating bullets, bluntly replied, "Not at all." The other two approached from behind and spoke, "We also find this matter very strange." Russell frowned, gritted his teeth, and held the fire arrow ready. His eyes became sharp. Something is coming. In an instant, the crows all flew up into the sky. Louder and louder noises came from the gloomy forest. Black zombies with glowing green eyes were advancing together. Russell exclaimed in horror, "Zombies!" The others couldn't help but be afraid. "Why are there zombies in the test area?" "Impossible, huh? What?" The blue-haired guy lowered his face and stammered, We have to run." He intended to run but was stopped by the other two. He was sweating profusely, his face drained of color. Their group was instantly surrounded by a horde of zombies. One person spoke in panic, "There's no escape route anymore." Suddenly a ring of fire erupted around them. The blue-haired guy looked at it in surprise. A wall of fire. This technique belongs to the fourth magic circle. Russell turned his face back and urgently ordered, "From now on, each person aims in a different direction and deals with the zombies breaking through the firewall from that direction. Okay?" Ian. The other three were momentarily silent, showing no movement. He raised his hand and shouted, "Did you hear clearly?" Only then did the group come back to their senses and awkwardly reply, "Yes." The blue-haired guy's facial muscles twitched. "I can't believe I intended to pick a fight with someone like him. If we really fought, the losses would surely be huge." Several zombies started rushing through the firewall. Russell worried inwardly. The firewall is just a temporary measure. Instantly, several zombies were hit by his fire arrows. He looked at the situation before him and thought, "I need to find the mages controlling these zombies. I have to find a way out of here." A zombie with a physical strength of 761 was charging through the firewall. In an instant, it was hit by an attacking circle, blowing off half its face. Russell frowned looking at it. A zombie, Russell silently judged, those heretics hunting forbidden arts along with the blasphemous entities they summon. Russell recalled, in the past, the Tower Master subdued those heretics. He posed a huge question mark to himself. So are these the remnants from that incident? What is their intention in coming here? Suddenly, his eyes widened as if realizing something. Russell shot fire arrows at them while murmuring, "Could it be that they're hunting me?" The zombies hit by the fire arrows continuously howled in pain. Russell regained his composure and speculated, "No, right now, I need to focus on fighting first." The magic they are using is a type of curse. As he predicted, behind them were two heretics in black robes controlling their green spiritual energy. One created shields using earthquakes. Russell analyzed the situation. One characteristic of it is its very low mana consumption. So the longer the fight drags on, the more disadvantageous it is for me. Finishing his thought, he turned his face back and ordered loudly, "Everyone use your mana reasonably." He devised a method. Reduce firepower and aim for their weak points. Some gritted their teeth and endured, some grumbled, "Easy for you to say." The orange-haired guy looked at the light systems attacking the zombies and reassured, "But anyway, the adjudicators will be here soon. If we hold out until then?" The green-haired guy gritted his teeth and replied, "The adjudicators won't come." One person was surprised. What are you saying?" Russell, holding the fire arrow, agreed. "He's right." Russell remembered the people in the interview and murmured, "There's no way the adjudicators." He frowned and stated a reality. Coming from the capital's magic tower wouldn't detect this evil energy. The blue-haired guy, while freezing a zombie, suspected perhaps they used some kind of trap to erase all signs of mana. Russell lowered his face, thinking of the ancient tree with the circle and the special red symbols from before. A trap. The green-haired guy summoned ice energy form in his hand. Reduce size. Then he shot 3 crystals towards the zombies. And increase sharpness. The blue-haired guy screamed in fear. "Damn it! Fighting using such sophisticated methods. What's the use?" The zombies on this side were also stopped by the orange-haired guy using the light system. He glanced at that guy thinking, what, even this guy is following suit? A heretic standing outside the circle admired. "They're quick-witted. They've started saving mana." One bared his teeth and laughed. "When the kid is imitating the disciple of that damn woman, huh?" That guy summoned a tall, muscular beast with a giant mace in its hand and boasted, "However, what if they encounter a situation where they can no longer save mana?" Over here, everyone continued to relentlessly attack the zombies. Suddenly, the giant monster charged through the firewall towards the orange-haired guy. It roared, drooling several pieces, looking incredibly fierce. Their group stared wide-eyed at it, spontaneously shouting in unison, "A minotaur!" The blue-haired guy knelt and summoned an ice domain towards the minotaur. The orange-haired guy also summoned the light system to attack it. That guy cupped his hands together and shot out a beam of crystal light, binding the minotaur tightly. In less than a minute, the minotaur broke free from the bindings. Blue energy streams emanated from its 2 eyes. Its fangs were covered in drool as it growled a few times. It swung its mace high up right in front of the small orange-haired guy. The orange-haired guy stood there stunned, lost in thought. Suddenly, red energy streams shot down from the sky. It was Origin Russell. He unleashed his ultimate move, Flaming Long Spear, with maximum output, causing the spiritual energy source to shoot straight into the Minotaur's chest. The Minotaur was hit by this powerful energy stream and sent flying several meters away. Russell, holding his weapon, landed on the ground. The heretics, seeing the purple crystals shatter in their palms, were surprised. "What?" One from behind couldn't help but be surprised. He defeated a giant Minotaur with just one blow. The green-haired guy stared wide-eyed, still terrified. "That magic just now." That guy looked down at Russell's sharp weapon and the blazing red aura and realized it has the destructive power comparable to a 5-circle magic spell. That guy stared intently at Russell, bewildered. Is he really a fellow student like me? Suddenly, Russell glanced to the side as if seeing something strange. He saw Pepper flying several circles in the air and hurriedly called out, "Pepper!" The 2 professors looked up and saw a red circle in the sky, hesitating. "That is," Russell gave a mysterious smile. "So you're hiding there." He held the blazing weapon in his hand, preparing a move. "Mage body." The green-haired guy, seeing this action, felt confused. What is he trying to do? He gripped the weapon tightly, growling, "Now." Russell swung the weapon back with all his might to gain momentum. Instantly, he threw the weapon high with all his strength and shouted, "It's my turn." The two professors seeing this couldn't help but panic. "We have to dodge quickly. Has our position been discovered?" The wind arrow flew in circles through the forest towards them. One cupped his hands together, summoning green spiritual energy, and roared, "Block it!" The zombies also stared wide-eyed upon seeing that bright wind arrow. They obeyed their master's command and charged like arrows. Just a few minutes later, they were engulfed by a hazy white light. The heretic gritted his teeth, sweating profusely all over. Russell's fire energy had now flown above his defensive position. Boom! A large explosion occurred in the forest. Red streaks brightly lit up the entire sky. Russell bent over wondering, have I dealt with them yet? The heretics appearing from nowhere tightly bound a person. That woman really raised a monster. One hiding behind a bloodied man murmured, "We saved this move to deal with the adjudicators." The bald one still bared his teeth and laughed. "Didn't expect to end up using it on you." Russell stared in astonishment at the scene before him. Two zombies bound, two people, gagged them, held swords to their necks, and advanced towards Russell. Then not just two, but their group was surrounded by these things.